Chapter 1. Welcome to the Shangmalian Academy. The magnificent hall was filled with sacred hymns. The velvet soft and silky black curtains slowly parted, and the one who stepped onto the stage was the most beautiful and noble lady of the Shangmalian Academy, Principal Cynthiazi. Urti. The 9 fairies surrounding the holy magister transformed into flowers and fireflies, rendering the stage dreamy and beautiful. There were 4 beautifully decorated long tables in the hall, and thousands of candles floating in the air above the tables lit up the hall. The candlelight shone on the golden plate and the silver goblet, refracting the colorful light, making it look like a dream. When Dake Dimming came back to his senses, he was already standing on the stage, and beside him was Principal Urti, who had a fragrant scent. Memories came back to his mind like water. Dake remembered the memories of his previous life. Shangmalian Academy. Isn't this the academy that was ridiculed before it was released, but after it was released, everyone was shouting that it was delicious? Duel. Shangmalian Super XX Academy. In the galactic game industry, where most of the money was invested in beautiful paintings and the story was crudely made, Duel. Shangmalian Super XX Academy could be said to be a rare stream of fresh air. Remember the URL, VIP Kanshu. VIP. Although the story framework was almost completely copied from Harry Potter, the ability system was borrowed, copied, from Yu-Gi-Oh! And other card games, and the characters of the duel cards came from various popular anime. The combination of these elements unexpectedly formed an interesting game. Even if you didn't attack the female characters in the game, you could still get a lot of fun from this game. Duel. Shangmalian Super XX Academy even became a card game starter for a long time, and all kinds of harmonious versions were popular in the country's pirate community. However, Dake held on to his righteous heart and stuck to his morals. He was determined not to touch this plagiarized, pirated and trashy game, so he only heard some of the settings and story from others. He vaguely remembered that the final boss of this game seemed to be a young noble called Dark Demon. As the only son of the Duchess, Dark Demon played the role of Draco Malfoy in the game. In the academy, he was an antagonist who fought against the main character in the early stages of the game. In the later stages, it was revealed that he was the descendant of the demon god. In the end, after the resurrected Demon King was killed, his bloodline awakened, and he became the great demon god. This gave the main character the opportunity to kill him and take away his fiancée. Speaking of which, Dark Demon was truly a tragic character. Even his name translated as Dark Demon. He was simply a clown that was destined to be tragic from the start. Wait, why does this name sound so familiar? Dake Dimming's face gradually turned pale. Dake Dimming, Dake Dimming. Dake snapped out of his shock when he heard the comforting voice calling him like a warm breeze. He tried to control the trembling muscles on his face and turned to Principal Urti. Principal Urti had silver hair that was as pure as the moonlight. Under her long eyelashes was a pair of blue eyes that seemed to suck in people's souls. As a target in the game, she was the Shangmalian moon, the most beautiful symbol. The luxurious dress that was cut to 2 sizes smaller than her actual size made the silver moon jewelry hanging on her chest look especially white. Dake realized that he was at the Shangmalian Academy's opening banquet as the first new student to receive the Academy's branch examination. He tried to recall his experience after his rebirth. After recovering his memories from his previous life, the memories of this life became blurry. But combined with the original setting of Harry Potter, he finally remembered. Shangmalian Academy was the only academy in the kingdom that could compete with the Academy of Secrets of the Holy Church. The academy was divided into 4 branches. These 4 branches were Aristocratic Academy, Knight Academy, Magic Academy, and the Fool's Academy. The students of the Aristocratic Academy were all pure-blooded nobles. The students of the Knight Academy were brave and righteous like knights. The students of the Magic Academy were the inheritors of knowledge and were knowledgeable and wise. Although the students of the Fool's Academy didn't have the courage of knights or the wisdom of wizards, they were innocent and pure. They were the most likely candidates. Dake wasn't too nervous about this. Before the demon god's blood was awakened, even the Academy's branch card wouldn't be able to detect it. He was the son of a duke, the noblest nobleman below the royal family. He would definitely be assigned to the aristocratic academy. Otherwise, this stupid game wouldn't be able to continue from the beginning. After calming down, Dark glanced at the location of the freshman, but it was difficult to find anyone who looked like the original protagonist among the densely packed heads. Then Dake realized that he didn't even know the original protagonist's name. But it didn't matter. Since he was the son of a hero who sealed the Demon King, he would soon stand out like a firefly in the dark night. Dake took a deep breath and said, "Principal, I'm ready." As expected of the only son of the Dimming family, Principal Aertii smiled. Among the 9 sprites that were flying around her, a griffin-like sprite flew towards Dark. When it arrived in front of Klaus, there was the Fool card with a crown, a lance, a grimoire, and a tarot card on the back, and a blank card on the front in its empty beak. Hold the branch card in your hand, Dimming. Following Principal Aertii's instructions, Dake took out the magic card from the fairy's beak. Then cover the branch card with your right hand over your left hand. Think about what you like and what you want. The branch card will guide you. Yes, Principal. Dake narrowed his eyes and began to imagine. His understanding of the game was limited. He only knew that as a villain boss in the game, he only killed himself after awakening the demon god's bloodline. And the demon god's bloodline awakened on the day of his coming-of-age ceremony. Before the bloodline awakened, although he didn't get along with the original protagonist, it was just small fights. It didn't reach the level of who lived and who died. His fiancée, the most popular female character in the game, only lost hope in him after he turned into a demon god. This gave the original protagonist a chance to take advantage of her. Then, as long as he could find a way to suppress the power of the demon god's bloodline before the coming-of-age ceremony, he would still be the son of the Duke. Not only would he have a high position, but he would also have a fiancée who would never leave him even if he did all kinds of bad things. Everything didn't seem that bad. A dazzling white light overflowed from his palm. Dake felt the heat from the branch card, as if the card was being printed. Principal Aertii's gentle voice sounded again. Dimming, raise the branch card and show this year's new students how to do the ceremony properly. Yes, Principal. Dake moved his right hand and saw that the branch card showed the symbol of a noble's crown. He raised the branch card high and inserted magic to trigger it. Bang! Like fireworks, the light suddenly shot out and formed a huge golden crown in the air. The branch card shouted, "Dake Dimming Noble House!" Oh! In the hall, cheers gradually rang out from the long table where the other students of the aristocratic academy were seated. Dake Dimming, the only son of the Duke with the title of Valkyrie, has been assigned to our school. OMG! It seemed that the young master was quite popular in the noble house. The corner of Dake's mouth rose slightly and he put his hand down. Beep. Detected that the demon god's bloodline has entered the awakening stage, triggered. Damn! Chapter 2. Dake Dimming walked off the stage amidst the cheers of the aristocratic academy students. Although his smile was a little stiff, he still tried to raise his arm and give his supporters the response they deserved. As a noble pure-blooded aristocrat, he had to maintain the necessary etiquette and not appear too abrupt, even though he was now very suspicious of his own pure-blooded. What kind of pure-blooded aristocrat would inherit the demon god's bloodline? Dake sat down in the aristocratic academy's seat and turned to face the stage. At this moment, the smile on his face that he was barely able to maintain suddenly collapsed. The demon god's bloodline has entered the awakening stage. This made him even more shocked than the system's trigger. What caused the demon god's bloodline to enter the awakening stage in advance? In the game, it should have been triggered at the very end for some unknown reason, right? Why didn't it trigger earlier or later? Why did it have to be triggered when I regained my memory? Could it be that this is the reason? No, I don't have time to be overly concerned about this problem. If I don't want to be taken away by Principal Aertiai's magic elven cannon, I have to think of a way as soon as possible. Fortunately, according to the system's prompt, the demon god's bloodline has just entered the awakening stage and hasn't fully awakened yet. I can still be saved. Dake's eyes flashed and he tried to call the system in his mind. Hello, host. The demon god support system is at your service. Damn the demon god support system. Dake gritted his teeth. This broken system actually existed to help him become a demon god. However, the war between humans and demons had ended more than 10 years ago. The war ended with the complete destruction of the demons and the complete sealing of the Demon King. Because of this, the human era had entered the Shang-Malian era without demons. In this Shang-Malian era where the demons were destroyed and the Demon King was in eternal slumber, how could there be room for heretics? After the Demon King in the original game broke out of the seal, he was still brutally beaten up. What was even worse was that it had been split into 7 parts, one after another, and its corpse was whipped. Although the demon god was above the Demon King, what could he do without an army? Wouldn't he die if he was exposed? He was even worse than the Demon King. He had 7 lives. Can you tell me how to fully awaken the bloodline of the demon god? Pride, envy, wrath, sloth, greed, gluttony, and bliss. These are the 7 cardinal sins that the demon god must face in order to awaken. Once any one of these 7 indicators breaks through the critical threshold, the host's demon god bloodline will gradually awaken and irreversibly transform into a great demon god. Current awakening progress. 0%. Host, please complete the quota as soon as possible. Expand the indicator. Yes. A moment later. 7 indicators appeared in Dake's vision. Pride, 92. Envy, 39. Rage, 93. Laziness, 71. Greed, 72. Voracious, 52. Bliss, 72. Dake's vision went dark as he glanced over. There were a total of 7 indicators. Other than envy and gluttony, which were slightly lower, the other indicators were all over 70. Among them, the rage category was as high as 93 points, so red that it was almost purple. So, I'm such a lazy, arrogant, greedy, hedonistic, and F***king irritable piece of garbage. This doesn't make sense. The upper limit of the indicator must be 1000. Gentle reminder from the Demon God support system. The upper limit of the major sins under normal circumstances is 120. The Demon God bloodline has entered the awakening stage. The host will fall more easily. The host only needs to continue working hard to break through the critical threshold of pride and rage, completely awaken the Demon God bloodline, and reclaim the glory of the demon race. Do you believe that I can continue working hard for a while? No. Can't be angry. I definitely can't be angry anymore. In just the blink of an eye, the rage value increased by a whole 1 point. Dake hurriedly held his breath and thought, Almighty Heavenly Dragon, Venerable Xitigarbha, Prajna all Buddhas, Prajna Bamakong. Rage +1. A few minutes later, Dake realized that the 7 indicators were not constant. Among them, the one that fluctuated the most was obviously the rage indicator. After he tried his best to calm down, the rage indicator gradually fell back to 93 points. As for major sins like pride and envy, which involved the root of one's nature, it was very difficult to reduce. As the saying goes, it's easy to change mountains and rivers, but hard to change one's nature. Even if he recovered the memories of his previous life, it only made pride slowly fall from 92 to 91. After all, the memories of this life were not forgotten. He had indeed been a young noble thug for more than 10 years. That kind of deep-rooted pride was difficult to eradicate in a short period of time. Even if he already had a clear understanding, it still required a long period of self-improvement before he could reverse it bit by bit. He had to reduce all 7 indicators below the standard line. Otherwise, as long as he was not careful, the corresponding emotions would very likely break through the critical threshold after erupting. Extreme emotions were more likely to cause explosive growth. It was difficult to reduce back to the original standard. Only by cultivating one's body and mind, avoiding arrogance, anger, obsession, greed, lust, jealousy, and laziness could he counter the 7 sins demon god bloodline and seize a chance of survival. Dake was enlightened. From today onwards I, Dake Dimming, am a brand new me. Please work hard to become a demon god and fall. Graham. Rage +1. While Dake was enlightened, the Academy allocation ceremony on the stage continued. One by one, the new students were allocated to the most suitable academy for them, and the aristocratic academy welcomed new students. However, due to the complicated relationship between the nobles, no one dared to sit next to the Duke's son. The Valkyrie, Yvette St. Diamond, had swept across the battlefield with her absolute strength. She had hated evil all her life and had annihilated countless devils. In the end, she had even assisted the heroes of that time in sealing the undying Demon King. She was known as the Twin Swords of the Kingdom and was revered by everyone. At the moment when the hero sacrificed himself to seal the Demon King, Yvette was the highest representative of pure strength in the kingdom. Only the principal of the Shang Malian Academy, the Pope of the Holy Church, and the principal of the Holy Church's Mystic Arts Academy could contend with Yvette. If Dake had not awakened his demon god bloodline, he could have relied on the protection of the goddess of war. No matter how bad things were, he could have enjoyed the glory and wealth of the future duke. Damned demon god bloodline. Rage +1. Guard against arrogance and impatience. Guard against arrogance and impatience. Dake hurriedly closed his eyes and emptied his mind, calming his surging emotions. Rage -1. Hello, may I sit here? Dake's eyes were still closed. Then I'll sit down. Hey! You're so weird. Did you not sleep well last night? I have a requiem incantation here, I can lend it to you. Dake finally couldn't help but open his eyes. He tried to speak in a calm and emotionless voice. The requiem spell should be a curse-type card, right? You use it to help you sleep. Is that so? Anna Greatbear asked in surprise. Her mouth was slightly agape, and she looked very pitiful. Dake's eyebrows twitched. He suddenly felt that he was losing control of his primitive force. Bliss +1. Bang! Rage +1. Chapter 3. Anna Greaterbuyer, that's my name. What about you? Dake Dimming. Greaterbuyer, the bear of the kingdom. Everyone in the Greaterbuyer family was born with superhuman strength. Regardless of gender, they were all as strong as brown bears. But what was up with this little lowly? Anna Greaterbuyer, who had just entered school, was a little shorter than her peers. When she climbed onto the stool, her feet could not even touch the ground. Her round cheeks were so pink that it looked like milk was about to drip out. It made people want to reach out and pinch her cheeks. Elongate her cheeks, pinch them flat, and elongate them again. Bliss +1. Greed +1. Wait a minute. https://vipkanchu. VIP Dake suddenly thought of something. Is this guy playing the role of Malfoy's lackey, Crabbe and Gower? There were not many people who dared to get close to the Duke's son as soon as they entered school. *CK. This is a trashy game with only female characters. Dake calmed himself down and decided to keep a distance from Deanna for the sake of his own life. Duel. There was one thing that was similar to almost all the dating games on the market. That was, as long as a female character appeared and was beautifully drawn, they were all playable characters. From the perspective of the players, if they could conquer the beautiful girls around the villains, it would be very tempting. Moreover, Lolas were a must for dating games. But none of this had anything to do with Dake. He did not have any thoughts about Deanna other than pinching her cheeks. The reason he kept a distance was to prevent himself from being addicted to pinching. In the early stages of self-cultivation, staying away from temptation was the best way. Moreover, after experiencing this for more than 10 minutes, Dark had completely lost confidence in his mental fortitude. He could stop being arrogant, but how could he stop being impatient, angry, greedy, and lust? Greed was the driving force for human progress. Reproduction was a necessary behavior for the continuation of a race. Dake was very troubled. Ai Ma Métis. Knights Academy. Sarah Swati. Sorcerer Institute. Klein Moretti. The House of Fools. With the passage of time, there was finally only one new student left who hadn't participated in the division ceremony. He also became the most attention-grabbing person at the scene, enjoying the collective attention of all the Shangmalian Academy students. Dake couldn't help but look over. The last freshman to step onto the stage had short black hair. His facial features were not very exquisite, but they were all above average. When combined together, it was very comfortable to look at. Comparatively speaking, Dark himself belonged to the type of blonde handsome boy whose every facial feature was exquisite to the extreme, showing off his abilities. As the villain throughout the game, he was affectionately called Golden Hair by the players. It was said that he was Yellow Hair's brother. White Gouda, a homonym for White God. Are you so casual with your naming? Dake was speechless. This must be the original male lead. God. Is that the god from the hero family? With the appearance of the White Gouda, the students in the hall couldn't help but discuss. Compared to the dimming family that had always been active in the eyes of the public, the god family disappeared after the hero's sacrifice. Whenever someone asked, the prophets would always exaggeratedly repeat the same sentence. Since ancient times, whenever a hero appeared, it was when humans needed him. So, was it the disaster or the hero that came first? Was it the disaster that made the hero appear? Or was it the hero's appearance that caused the disaster? No matter if it was the prophets or the sages, they always kept this question a secret. Dake, do you think the hero's son will come to our academy? Deanna asked with sparkling eyes. Not only her, but many people in the House of Nobles were also looking forward to the White Gouda joining. Although the god family kept a low profile, they were still a noble family since ancient times. It was understandable that they were assigned to the House of Nobles. If the White Gouda also joins our academy, then wouldn't the kingdom's twin swords be together? The students in the House of Nobles were discussing with excitement. However, their wish was destined to never come true. Dake looked at the floating Deshwan in his vision and couldn't help but smile. Looks like I can do it if I want to. White Gouda. Knights Academy. The fireworks released by the Academy card formed a giant lance in the air. The White Gouda walked to their table amidst the crazy cheers of the Knights Academy. We have God. We have God. The name White Gouda echoed throughout the hall. The cheers were even more enthusiastic than when Dake completed the Academy allocation ceremony. Jealousy +1. Rage +1. Dake quickly calmed himself down. He clearly felt that he wasn't jealous at all. Why did his jealousy indicator +1? There must be something wrong with this garbage system. Dake felt that his dignity was being insulted. Principal Aerti's gentle voice suppressed the cheers in the hall. Freshmen, keep your academy card well. It will guide you for the next 6 years of your academy life. In the Shangmalian Academy, the academy allocation ceremony was also a process of awarding academy cards. Every freshman would receive an academy card during the allocation ceremony. This academy card represented the student's identity and was also the first magic card that the student personally made after entering the academy. It would be an essential tool in the life of the academy and accompany the students for a total of 6 years. Dake also looked at his academy card. As the only son of a duke, he naturally received higher education from a noble family before entering the academy. He had a basic understanding of magic, magisters, and magic cards. In the kingdom, those who could receive the Shangmalian Academy's admission letter were all gifted with magic. In other words, they would become magisters in the future. The magic of a magister would increase with age. Repeated use of magic would improve the quality of the magic, but it would have a very limited effect on the growth of the magic. Because there was no such thing as meditation to increase the magic, humans were completely unable to defeat the demons who were born with powerful magic. Until the appearance of the most powerful magister in history, Merlin, the situation of the battle was reversed. Merlin used alchemy to refine knowledge, magic, imagination, potions, and many other elements into cards, and created a magic card that transcended the era, and selflessly made this knowledge known to the public. Since then, magisters abandoned their magic wands and continuously created powerful magic cards, completely wiping out the demons who were already behind the times. The Academy's Academy card that was initially provided was a semi-finished magic card. It required the students to personally complete the last step to create a complete Academy card. Principal Arti used a short speech to complete the final speech. Then she took out a Gourmet Series magic card. With a light wave of her hand, all the tables were covered with exquisite delicacies. In front of the countless delicious dishes, all the students temporarily forgot about other things and happily ate to their heart's content. Among them, only Dake stared at the delicacies in front of him and froze. Dake, you don't like this honey-glazed lamb leg? Then let Deanna help you destroy it. Deanna quickly snatched Dake's honey-glazed lamb leg. Jealousy +1. Gluttony -1. Chapter 4. With Deanna's help, gritting his teeth, Dake successfully restrained his urge to eat. As for the jealousy +1, Dake expressed that he did not know what jealousy was. He looked at the empty plate in front of him and suppressed the irritation in his heart. His gaze swept across the delicacies on the table. Roast beef, roast chicken, lamb chops, sausages, steak, Yorkshire pudding, baked potatoes with cream, gravy, tomato sauce, beans. Maintaining his elegant demeanor, he quietly swallowed his saliva. Dake scooped some beans from the large silver bowl and poured them onto his plate. Let's start with the beans. Gluttony is not eating. Eating in moderation shouldn't increase the gluttony indicator. As expected of the delicacies created by the headmaster of Arti, who was given the title of saint, even the ordinary bean stew had its own unique flavor. Dake picked out a bean from the pile and stuck it in with a silver fork. He then sliced it with a knife and put it into his mouth piece by piece. As he chewed and swallowed, the flavor of the bean slowly spread in his mouth. It was so damn sweet. He remembered the URL. Vip Kanchu. Vapidake could not help but squint his eyes and stick the other half of the bean. Sitting opposite him was another student of the Noble Academy, Luo Flotty. She was holding a silver spoon and scooped a large spoonful of beans from a small bowl and stuffed it into her mouth. Rose Flotty couldn't help but feel her cheeks heat up when she saw her peer eating beans in such an elegant and meticulous manner. She stealthily pulled back the silver spoon that was halfway in her mouth. Learning from Dake, Luo picked up a knife and fork and stuck the beans awkwardly. However, the beans would always escape from the knife and fork. This made her have a good impression of Dake, who was proficient in using a knife and fork to eat beans. I've always heard that the only son of the Duke's family has a bad character and has no noble demeanor at all. I didn't expect him to be so well-mannered. Girls of this age always like to imagine other people's characters from the details. Moreover, she was a runaway girl who had just escaped from the heavy noble etiquette. She was so excited about the freedom after entering the school that her brain lacked oxygen. Otherwise, she wouldn't have imagined young Master Dake as the benchmark of nobility. Dake, who was struggling with the beans, did not notice the girl's strange behavior. Seeing that the beans on his plate were almost finished, he began to consider the next delicacy. Perhaps Yorkshire pudding would be a good choice. Although the Yorkshire pudding was called pudding, it was actually more like a kind of bread and tasted like soft bread. It was commonly eaten as an after-dinner dessert with roast beef dishes. When it was made, the oil dripping from the roast beef was smeared on the plate of pudding. When the oil and smoke wafted out, the batter was poured into the plate. After the pudding was baked, it expanded into the shape of a loaf of bread. The skin was golden and crispy, and the insides were soft and delicate. A layer of gravy with minced meat was poured on top of it. Just imagining it made Dake salivate. He was about to reach for the Yorkshire pudding when Deanna suddenly said, "Don't worry. Dake, do you like beans? Deanna's share is also for you." As she spoke, she poured all the beans on the plate in front of her into Dake's plate. Then she added, "Take it as a thank you gift for the honey-flavored lamb leg." She turned around and whispered, "Deanna doesn't like beans." Dake looked at the pile of beans on his plate and could not help but twitch his eyebrows. Fury +1. F***CK. Even though he was not that angry, his fury indicator suddenly increased. Was it because the demon god's bloodline had entered the awakening stage that made it easier for him to fall into depravity? Dake silently swallowed the beans. He was anxious and irritated, but his posture was calm and graceful. His movements were neither hurried nor slow. When he wiped out all the beans on the plate, all the food on the table disappeared from the plates and bowls. Now that the main course was over, it was time for dessert. Various flavors of ice cream, apple pie, syrup pie, chocolate sponge cake, fried jam donut, wine jam pudding, strawberry pie appeared on the table. An extremely rich and sweet aroma assaulted his nostrils. Dake silently stared at the desserts. He was not full at all. The hunger in his stomach and the rich aroma of the desserts made him irresistible. He reached out his evil hand to his favorite chocolate sponge cake, and his previously suppressed appetite suddenly exploded. Gluttony +1. It's only 1 point. I just lost 1 point. Dake reached out to the syrup pie again. Gluttony +1. It's okay. Gluttony's indicator is still very high. Starting from tomorrow, I will definitely be able to reduce it back. Gluttony +1. Dake ate another piece of strawberry pie and finally stopped. Then he took a wet towel from the side and carefully wiped the sugar stains on the corner of his mouth. Dake, do you like desserts too? Deanna loves desserts too. You like to eat everything except beans, right? Ignoring the girl's whispers, Dake slightly adjusted his posture and looked at the long table of the Knights Institute. At this time, there was a new student beside White Gouda who was happily chatting with him. If he guessed correctly, it should be the main character's gay friend who played the role of Ron Weasley. The poor main character's gay friend, after doing all the dirty and tiring work in Harry Potter, he finally got his hands on Hermione Granger. He could be considered to have successfully eaten delicious soft rice. But in duel, he definitely wouldn't be able to get a single one of them in the dating sim game, St. Mary and Super Academy. A lonely life might be his final ending. Dake could not help but sigh. At least he still had a fiancée to look forward to when he entered the school next year. Then, where was the first female lead who played the role of Hermione Granger? Dake glanced a few times, but did not find the girl who was particularly close to the main character, White, so he looked away. However, even though Dake had already looked away, the perceptive White had already noticed his gaze. Perhaps it was because Dake's temperament was too outstanding among his peers, so it was hard to ignore him. "Who's the guy with the eyes on his nose?" White asked in a low voice. Luobot Broheim, the main character of Ron beside him, was puzzled. "Aren't the eyes on the nose?" I'm talking about the forehead." White pointed at his forehead. Luobot shrugged. "If you're talking about the blonde guy, then he's the son of the kingdom's only duchess, Yarvet Saint Dimming Dake Dimming." White murmured. "Yarvet Dimming, the Valkyrie who is known as the kingdom's twin swords with my father? Then her son should also be as virtuous as the Valkyrie and abhors evil. Maybe I can become good friends with him." Luobot could not help but laugh. "White, not everyone inherits their parents' virtues like you." White: "Is that so? But I don't even know what my parents look like." Chapter 5. When you go back, don't forget to use your school card to check the school rules. Finally, I wish the new students that in the next 6 years, you will be able to find your own value in the Shang Malian Academy. The opening banquet ended with the cheers of the students. Headmaster Aertii didn't say anything like Headmaster Dumbledore did in Harry Potter to lead the plot. This made Dake somewhat uncertain about the situation. But when he thought about it carefully, even if something bad happened, the protagonist would take care of it. What did it have to do with him, the villain? It was better to take care of himself. The Shang Malian Academy was a closed school. Except for the annual holidays, students were not allowed to leave the school. Once the school was closed, money, power, and connections would be cut off. Knowledge, ability, and credits were the biggest factors that determined one's ranking. Even if he was the son of a duke, he would be despised if he was ranked last. What's more, those who could enter the Shang Malian Academy were all future magisters. They were not afraid of the noble's authority. Remember this. https://vipkanchu. VIP Dake knew that his reputation was not good. As a pure-blooded noble, the students of the Noble Academy were close to him because of empathy. But this was in line with his thoughts. He wanted to reduce social interactions and cultivate his character. While maintaining a Buddhist lifestyle, he wanted to study knowledge and find a way to completely remove the devil's bloodline before it fully awakened. St. Marian Academy was the place with the deepest heritage and the largest collection of books in the kingdom, excluding the Academy of the Holy Church's mystic rites. If they couldn't find a way to remove the demon god's bloodline even here, then they could basically announce it. Following the seniors out of the Great Hall, they ascended a marble staircase, passed through a winding corridor filled with portraits, and crossed a high suspended bridge. The freshmen of the Aristocratic Academy finally arrived at the tower located in the southwest of the Academy, the dormitory building of the Aristocratic Academy. The Shang Malian Academy had 4 such towers. Each tower had 9 floors except for the basement. The first floor was the common room. Starting from the second floor, it was the dormitory of the 1st to 6th graders. The 8th floor was the dual practice room, and the 9th floor was the observatory. The guardian statue of the Noble Academy was a legendary creature called the Feathered Serpent. Feathered serpents had colorful wings. They were deep and wise, gentle and elegant. They couldn't lie. They could see through the fabrications and see the truth. They were the truth announcers. The dormitory of the Aristocrats' Academy was the only tower among the 4 academies that didn't require credentials, passwords, or other keys to enter. It was all because of the existence of the feathered serpent demon statue. As long as you passed by this magic statue, it would know whether or not you were a student of the Aristocratic Academy. Dake saw Deanna running into the tower in a hurry and followed her. When he passed by the feathered serpent, the golem that was entrenched in front of the door suddenly opened its snake eyes. Its pupils were vertical, bright and spirited. It didn't look like an inanimate golem at all. Dake kept quiet out of fear. However, the white light emitted from the feathered serpent's eyes only scanned his body once before withdrawing. Then the feathered serpent closed its eyes again, not making a single sound. Dake hastened his footsteps and entered the tower. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. I almost thought that the demonic bloodline had been discovered. Originally, when Dake saw that there was a progress bar for the awakening of the demonic bloodline, he thought that there was still room for error. But now, even if it was only 1% awakened, it couldn't escape the eyes of the feathered serpent demon statue. Is this the legendary hell difficulty? Dake, what's your room number? Deanna ran over with the school card in her hand. Dake glanced at the door with lingering fear and also injected magic into the school card. The crown pattern on the front of the school card faded away, revealing the information he wanted to know. Room 201. Deanna is room 233. It's so far away. Aren't they all in the same building? Dake casually said a few words and quickly went up to the second floor to find the room at the front of the second floor. It wasn't until he entered the room and locked the door that he gradually relaxed. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. I've never been so stressed in my 2 lifetimes. The dormitory was a single dormitory. Not only did it have a big soft bed, it also had a separate bathroom. There were brand new daily necessities on the bed, as well as a set of first-year textbooks. Dake made the bed with great difficulty, but his brain was too tired to think. "I'll think about it tomorrow." The sky had just brightened. Dake opened his eyes tiredly. There was a copper wall clock on the wall opposite the bed, and the hour hand just pointed to 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. Class starts at 8. Let's sleep a little more. Sloth +1. The cruel system prompt suddenly floated in front of his eyes. Dake was shocked, and all his sleepiness was gone. Type of plant. Fury. Didn't increase by 1. Dake wiped the sweat off his forehead. Now pride and fury had the least room for error. Envy and gluttony had relatively more room for error. 15 minutes later, Dake, who had changed into his school uniform, went to the common room on the first floor. The Aristocrat Academy's uniform was black with gold edges, and there was a small crown on the chest. The Academy also gave him a card bag that could hold 21 magic cards. The common room was very quiet, and the magic lamp hanging on the wall would automatically light up when someone came in. Dake, who had lost the joy of waking up, looked dispirited as he found a place to sit, and then took out the textbooks one by one from his shoulder bag. In order to remove the demon god's bloodline, other than finding the correct method, the necessary knowledge and ability were also very important. Imagine if there was a magic book that recorded the correct method in front of you, but you couldn't understand it at all. How despairing would that be? The opposite of sloth is diligence. Dake picked out the textbook that he needed for today's first lesson. Beginner's Summoning Guidebook. Summoning was the method to awaken magic cards, and it was a basic spell that every magus had to master. The summoning class was set for the first lesson on Monday to teach the freshmen how to summon the familiar from the Academy card. Under the slightly dim yellow light, Dark Diamond opened his textbook and began to preview in the public lounge where there was no one else. A few minutes later, Dake gradually got into the zone. In his previous life, he was a graduate after all, and he had the necessary ability to decipher words. Among the young magus of his age, there shouldn't be anyone who was better at writing than him. Maybe it's not bad to become a top student like this. Pride +1. Dake suddenly realized that he had improved, and he didn't even mention that plant. If he could get into the zone while studying, it actually felt pretty good. This was because he could feel that he was improving. Humans were born with a thirst for knowledge. Only by constantly acquiring knowledge, exploring the unknown, and solving mysteries, could one open up new era after era. After studying seriously for an hour. Greed +1. Fury +1. Chapter 6. The temperature in September had begun to drop. The Shangmalian morning was chilly, just like the coldness of the world, beautiful and cold. Trembling with anger, Dake never thought that the thirst for knowledge could be seen as greed. Was the demon god bloodline so shameless for the sake of awakening? What should he do now? Should he continue with the book? Should he continue with the class? Laziness and diligence. Thirst for knowledge and greed. How was he going to balance these two? Was Dake too serious in his studies? Website. https://vipcanshu. Did I study for too long? Dark raised his head and looked at the clock above the fireplace. Before he knew it, it was already 7:20. I studied for about 65 minutes, but I only really entered the zone for about 50 minutes. As I read for a long time, I gradually developed a thirst for more related knowledge. When the thirst reaches a certain level and is not satisfied, it will turn into greed. But it's very difficult for a normal person to reach that level. Dake knew himself well in this aspect. He knew that he was not the kind of person who thirsted for knowledge. After the demon god bloodline entered the awakening stage, the lower limit of his sin index became very low. For example, if someone else had to have a thirst of 10, it would be seen as greed. But he only needed a thirst of 9, 8, or even 7, and it would be seen as greed. Therefore it was not that he could not study. It was just that he could not be too immersed in his studies. An ordinary class and an ordinary homework assignment should still be within the scope of tolerance for mistakes. Active learning and passive learning were definitely different. As for whether this was the case, he would have to do a few small experiments. Dake took a deep breath. His greed index was 73, so there was still a lot of room for trial and error. Stupid people would choose to retreat at this time. Smart people would try to find a suitable method. Pride +1. Dake closed the book. There were many people in the common room, but he had been immersed in the sea of knowledge and did not notice. After packing up the book, Dake slung his shoulder bag over his shoulder and walked out of the tower alone. He crossed the bridge and entered the castle. The interior of the Academy's castle is complicated, but the Academy card will point you in the right direction. The food in the Academy's cafeteria was rich and varied, unlike the opening banquet last night where there were almost no vegetarian dishes. Dake picked some simple food and ate a decent breakfast in moderation. Then, he followed the guidance of the branch card and found the classroom for the first class. It was almost 8 o'clock, but most of the freshmen would arrive around this time. The classroom for the summoning class was very big. It was a lecture hall that could accommodate 2 classes. The first lesson of the Aristocrat Academy seemed to be with the new students of the Knight Academy. Dake quietly went to the last row's left corner and put his bag into the drawer. "Hey!" As soon as he sat down, Deanna, who came and went like a ghost, approached him shamelessly. Dake looked at her face, which was as white as a freshly peeled egg, and quickly suppressed the urge to pinch it. Luckily, I reacted fast enough. Dake pressed his finger and casually pointed to the front row. Deanna was about to sit next to him when she asked curiously, "Dake wants me to sit with her?" Dake still didn't say anything. Deanna said happily, "She doesn't look very cheerful, Deanna will go and help her." Dake still didn't say anything. Deanna had already run to the front row and played with the girl who looked a little timid. Jealousy +1. You dodged the first but not the 15th. Dake was silent. Lucy Flotty was a little flustered when dealing with Deanna, who was overly enthusiastic. The girl who had just celebrated her birthday half a month ago didn't even take a step out of the castle before coming to the Shangmalian Academy. Her parents died at the hands of the Demon King's army, and she stayed in the orphanage for 4 years. When she was 5 years old, she was brought home by her uncle, who was a viscount. Viscount Flotty and his wife had been married for 10 years without any children. They originally wanted to bring her home and raise her as their own daughter, but they didn't expect that his wife would get pregnant just half a year after she entered the castle. Therefore Lucy, who had only enjoyed the treatment of a little princess for half a year, became a burden that no one loved and cared for her. The Viscount and his wife couldn't send her back to the orphanage because of their pride, so they simply left her in the castle and let the maids take care of her. She had 3 meals a day, bought preschool education books, and taught noble etiquette. But other than that, there was nothing else. She was grounded in her room in the castle. Occasionally, she would see the Viscount and his wife playing with her cousin in the garden through the window, and her heart would feel stifled. A person's personality was greatly influenced by their family environment. Lucy gradually became introverted and liked to fantasize, but she was also obviously timid and didn't dare to reach out. At this time, Deanna, who appeared in front of her, was a ray of light that shone into her heart. Lucy was gradually won over by Deanna, and the 2 little girls became lovey-dovey together. Childhood friendship was pure, and it was also a treasure that was difficult to regain after growing up. And Dake, who had coincidentally facilitated this development, was also happy to see it happen. Deanna has a new friend, so she shouldn't come to harass me anymore, right? He slightly raised his head, allowing the wind to caress his cheeks, and then looked out of the window in the direction of the wind. The Shangmalian's unique Ji-Baiha had opened. Professor Sarah Shi Erfu, the first-year summoning teacher, stepped into the classroom 1 second before the bell rang. The classroom, which had been particularly noisy because of the freshness of the new students, instantly quieted down. It wasn't that the freshmen had shut their mouths, but with Professor Shi-Erfu's entrance, a silent wind blew into the classroom, and instantly silenced all sounds. Most of the students in the aristocratic academy had received elite preschool education, and most of them immediately realized that Professor Shi-Erfu had used the mute card. But many people in the Knights Academy didn't have the same idea. Luo Boat, who was sitting next to White, even screamed out of fear. His cheeks and neck were so red that they looked like they were cooked. When Professor Shi-Erfu walked to the podium and lifted the mute card, Luo Boat's scream suddenly sounded. Ah! W. Broheim, for the sake of the first class, I won't deduct your credits for the time being. Professor Sylph tucked her pale blonde hair behind her pointed ears and said indifferently, Don't worry, I'm going to kill you. Before the class starts, I'll talk about the school rules. I believe that most of you haven't read them yet. I'm Sarah Shi-Erfu, half-elf, and a summoning teacher in the Shangmalian Academy. A class in the Shangmalian Academy was 90 minutes long. The first class started at 8 in the morning, and there was a half-hour break between classes. The second class ended at 11:30 in the afternoon. There was only one class in the afternoon, and it started at 2 o'clock. The academy used a credit system, and like Hogwarts, there was a school championship. It wasn't just an honor, but a real Holy Grail. The Marian Holy Grail was said to be a magic device that had existed since the academy was founded. Because it had the power to grant wishes, it was also called the Wishing Cup. Among the 4 academies, the academy with the highest credits would win the school championship. The Wishing Cup would give all the students from the 1st to 6th grades a chance to make a wish. There was an inscription engraved on the Wishing Cup. The greedy have nothing. Please recommend me to your collections. Chapter 7. When Professor Shi-Erfu mentioned the Wishing Cup, both the freshmen of the Aristocrats Academy who pretended to be calm and the freshmen of the Knights Academy who were loud couldn't help but talk about it. Luo Boat, who had just made a fool of himself, didn't want to be taught a lesson. His voice was the best in the Knights Academy, and he was so excited that his neck turned red again. White, did you hear what Professor Shi-Erfu said? As long as we can get the Wishing Cup, each of us can fulfill a wish. Don't be too excited, Redneck. The professor said that he would give us a chance to make a wish, but he didn't say that it would be fulfilled. Although White was also very excited, it was obvious that she had a clearer mind. On the other side, Deanna was the loudest person in the Aristocrats Academy. She shouted excitedly at Luo C, but then she felt that it wasn't enough, so she jumped up and said to Dake, If we get the Wishing Cup, I must wish for a candy house with chocolate walls, candy lamps, a bed of candy, a cake top, a candy rug and a pudding cushion. And it must be so big. Looking at Deanna happily describing the candy house, Dake was almost infected by her emotions. Seeing that greed +1 didn't appear in his vision, Dake was secretly relieved, and then he smiled and reminded her, Deanna, greedy people have nothing. If the Wishing Cup could really fulfill any wish, it wouldn't have been placed in the Shangmalian Academy for the students to compete for. According to the inscriptions on the Wishing Cup, most of the wishes that could be fulfilled were small things. Otherwise, Dake would have directly made a wish to remove the bloodline of the demon god. Remember the URL, VIP can't you? Vian, tell that damn system to get out of here. This time, Professor Shi-Erfu didn't use the silence card. Instead, he waited for the freshmen's discussion to gradually die down before he patted the table and said, In addition to determining the ownership of the school championship, academic credits are also Shangmalian's hard currency. Using academic credits, you can buy anything you want in Traveler Street, and you can also make transactions with any Shangmalian teachers and students. Of course, every transaction will be recorded by the school card. Only the credits obtained through legitimate transactions will be recognized by the school. Lastly, does anyone know how to obtain credits? Professor Shi-Erfu placed his hands on the podium and scanned the classroom seriously. As a half-elf, Professor Shi-Erfu had inherited the ethereal beauty and long lifespan of elves. There was no trace of age on his face at all. Although she always had a serious expression on her face, she would occasionally reveal a weak expression in private. This became her selling point instead. In Duel. In the Shang Malian Super XX Academy, Professor Shi Erfu was the most popular professor among the players. Of course, she was also a playable character. If it wasn't for the fact that she had displayed a stern and rigid image when she first appeared, which lowered some favorability points, Dake's primordial power might have exploded again. At that time, it wouldn't be a matter of whether or not to go to class, it would be a matter of whether or not he wanted to live. In the face of Professor Shi Erfu's question, the freshmen of the two schools surprisingly didn't respond. It seemed that they were like Dake and didn't read the school rules. After a while, a student finally raised her hand. Professor Shi Erfu glanced at her and directly called out her name. Ai Ma Métis, you answer. Ai Ma Métis was a brown-haired little girl with a round face. She seemed to be developing slower than her peers, but she was taller than Diana. When she stood up, she was a little nervous and accidentally bit her tongue, but at least she answered smoothly. The easiest way to obtain credits is to attend classes seriously. You can get 10 credits for each class. If you can answer the professor's questions correctly or satisfy the professor, you can get extra credits. In addition, the results of the final exam can also be converted into credits. And, there's also the magician duel. Very good, Métis, 5 credits. Professor Shi Erfu applauded and gestured for her to sit down, then continued to add, if you answer the questions correctly in class, you can get extra credits. But if you don't attend class seriously, the professor has the right to deduct the corresponding credits. In addition, the magician duel is very important in Shang Malian. It can bring a lot of credits to each school. As for how to participate in the duel, your duel teacher will tell you. Now the class officially begins. Open your beginner's summoning guide. Miss Know-It-All. Dake looked at Ai Ma's back and realized that she should be the last of the 3 protagonists. However, Emma's fluffy brown hair and the flesh on her face that had yet to disappear made him unable to arouse her. Dake didn't want to have any contact with them, but he also didn't feel the need to deliberately avoid them. In particular, this female lead's appearance didn't make him feel good. Next, Professor Shi Erfu began to teach the most basic summoning technique. Summoning technique was a technique based on the existence of the magician card. It could summon spirits, items, potions, and all kinds of other things sealed in the magician card. It was said that on a deeper level, there were sacrificial summoning techniques, fusion summoning techniques, ritual summoning techniques, reverse summoning techniques, and many other summoning techniques. Some magician cards were even equipped with special summoning spells. The proficiency of the summoning technique determined how many magician cards a duelist could use in the same time. In short, if you needed 5 seconds to cast the summoning technique, and your opponent only needed 3 seconds, he could cast the summoning technique 2 seconds earlier than you. If your summoning technique had a cooldown of 30 seconds, then you couldn't even use the 3rd magician card within a minute. The famous duel master Lu Sun of Switzerland once said, "Summoning technique can determine a duelist's upper and lower limits." The task of this class was to use the summoning technique to summon the familiar sealed in the faculty card. Professor Shi Erfu spent half an hour explaining the school rules, and another half an hour teaching the basic theory of the summoning technique. Finally, he left half an hour for the students to experiment. After Dake confirmed that his greed index didn't increase, he followed the steps in the textbook to try the summoning technique. Because he had a preview in the common room in the morning, his progress was faster than most of the new students. Because the faculty card was a beginner's tool, the summoning technique was easier than the average magician card. Therefore, Dake succeeded in summoning the familiar sealed in the faculty card at 9 o'clock. The faculty card was a compound magician card. It was very special, and its functions were very powerful. Because the creation of the school card was done by the students themselves, every student would summon a different familiar when using the school card. In the name of Dake Dimming, familiar summoning. The faculty card used a special summoning spell to reduce the difficulty of the summoning technique. As Dake chanted the spell correctly, The magic in his body flowed from his fingertips into the faculty card. Because of this, the faculty card bloomed with a bright light, attracting countless attention. AI Ma, who had also done a preview but failed several times, couldn't help but look over. Under the white light, Dake's fair face, handsome face, and peaceful eyes left a deep impression on AI Ma. She gritted her teeth, and without looking at what Dake summoned, she quickly flipped through the textbook, looking for mistakes, and tried the summoning technique again. Her competitive spirit was fully exposed. But Dake wasn't relaxed at this time. He suddenly found that the speed of the magical power flowing out was getting faster and faster, as if the faculty card was actively absorbing his magical power. The magical power that had increased due to the awakening of the demon god's bloodline was almost exhausted. At this time, a hexagram magic array suddenly appeared on the faculty card. This is... Looking at the familiar that he summoned with the faculty card, Dake felt that there was a big problem. It was a little demon that looked like a bat. And it wasn't an ordinary little demon. Chapter 8. Is it a fiend? Professor Shi Erfu had already made his way over to Dake's side. The unique fragrance of the elven race wafted into his nose, making his heart itch slightly. Dake took a deep breath and asked in confusion, "Professor, isn't the age of the devils already over? Why can I still summon fiends?" Professor Shi Erfu explained in an extremely flat tone, "The familiars of the branch card are just a type of magical fairy. Strictly speaking, they are products of alchemy. Just like the golem, it wasn't a real life. The so-called fiend species was just a classification of magical elves. It did not mean that they were devils. As an archmage, he had to learn how to distinguish the truth from the truth and not be blinded by appearances. As for why you summoned a fiend, it had something to do with your magic power, knowledge, and personality. Moreover, the magic elves' technology is not perfect, and there are many things that cannot be explained." The surrounding freshmen nodded their heads as if they didn't fully understand. Only Dake asked seriously, "Professor, what's the name of my familiar?" Professor Shi Erfu said seriously, "This will be your homework after class. Before the next summoning class begins, if you successfully summon your own familiar, find out its type, name, and characteristics, then write a 300-word report to me. Alright, 5 points for dimming." With that, Professor Shi Erfu walked towards another student. Dake looked at her back and wondered if she did not even know the name of the fiend. After all, this thing was a little devil beast. Duel. Sheng Malian Super XX Academy was indeed an ultimate stitched monster. It had even borrowed, copied, attacked. 1 second to remember https://m. Vipkanshu. VIP. Even though he knew that the game was a hodgepodge, he couldn't just copy it like that, right? Dake felt a headache coming on. The little fiendish magical beasts seemed to be able to evolve into ultimate blood-sucking magical beasts. There were too many evolutionary branches of the Digibeast, and it was too messy for him to remember clearly. However, the familiars of the Academy card should belong to the category of low-level magical spirits. Their main function was to help their master transmit messages or send and receive letters, replacing the positioning of the owls. According to the Magus, the intelligence level of a familiar was 2.5, which was slightly lower than that of a normal wild beast. It was harmless. Dake played with the little fiend's head and found that its reaction was still a little slow. Was it because it had just been born? The little demonic beast's body was round, and it had bat-like wings and 3-fingered claws. There was a white skull imprinted on its forehead, and it looked a little ugly after looking at it for a long time. Most importantly, it had wings and could fly, so it was more suitable to be a tamed demon. Dake quickly accepted the fact that he had summoned a little devil. After all, wasn't the demon god's familiar a little devil? Then Dake started to look around. To put it nicely, he was observing the progress of his classmates, but in reality he was absent-minded. Unknowingly, He had already been in class seriously for more than an hour. If he didn't take a break to relax, wouldn't he be in trouble? An idea slowly formed in Dake's mind. Then he had a sudden realization. Being too immersed in studying would trigger the greed indicator. Then, if he took a break from studying and achieved a balance between work and rest, wouldn't it be a perfect solution? Bingo. Dake suppressed his pride in time and didn't let it evolve into arrogance. Perhaps because he was a role model, the new students became more enthusiastic about learning summoning magic. Finally, Miss Know-It-All was the second to complete the summoning of her familiar. The moment AI Ma successfully summoned her familiar, she didn't observe what kind of familiar it was. Instead, she subconsciously looked back at the corner of the classroom. Her eyes clearly showed that she wanted to compete, as if she wanted to say, "Look, I also succeeded." However, Dake's gaze only made contact with her slightly before passing by, as if he didn't care about her at all. AI Ma turned back and was a little unhappy. But the little familiar squatting on the table quickly made her smile again. It was a small otter with snow-white fur. Whether it was its bean-sized eyes, its short limbs, or its timid posture of rubbing its face, it deeply poked at the little girl's cute spot. Is it really an otter? Dake had already expected it. Otters were sharp and alert, curious, and were the guardian of Miss Know-It-All in the original work. Naturally, it was the most likely choice. Then Luo Boat's familiar should be a hound, and White's familiar should be a stag. Dake glanced over and found that Luo Boat and White were both scratching their heads in worry. Their progress was obviously not very smooth. In fact, the new students of the aristocratic academy generally summoned their familiars faster than the new students of the Knight Academy. This was the advantage of preschool education. The overly surprised cry attracted Dake's attention. He found that Deanna had also successfully summoned her familiar before the class ended. It was a round-headed, iron-eating beast. The panda, which was only the size of a stuffed toy, was lying on the table. Its eyes were still in a daze, looking silly and adorable. It really is a perfect match for her. Dake couldn't help but cover his eyes. How could the Greyby family, the kingdom's bear, produce such a silly thing? All right. Pandas are also bears. Deanna was obviously very satisfied with her familiar. She even directly lifted it above her head and spun it around until Professor Shi Erfu glared at her. She quickly stopped. Luo Si, the only one who didn't summon his familiar, couldn't help but become anxious. The second class in the morning was Introduction to Magic. If the summoning technique was the way to use the magic card, then Introduction to Magic was the basic theory of making magic cards. And the corresponding dual class was Actual Combat. The students were ordered not to summon their familiars in the school corridor, but there were still people who didn't follow the rules and ran around with their familiars. Dake ignored those people and went to the Introduction to Magic classroom first. The break between classes was a full half hour. The lazy people were wasting time, while the hard-working people had already started to prepare. In order not to be judged as lazy, Dake took out the textbook for Introduction to Magic, Basic Theory of Magic Engineering 1, and started to read it casually. Thus, when AI Ma Métis hurried into the classroom, she saw a hard-working person sitting in the last row by the window. This didn't seem like something someone from the House of Aristocrats would do. Usually, such a person should go to the School of Magic Engineering. AI Ma muttered such words and found a seat in the first row. She also took out her textbook to prepare. Dake glanced at AI Ma on the right side of the front row, but his mind was thinking about whether there were any magic cards that could alleviate his current predicament. He didn't want to remove the devil's bloodline, but he wanted to absorb some negative emotions or calm his mind. Chapter 9. The professor of Introduction to Magic was Professor Ka Zaire, a master alchemist with goblin blood. In the era where magic technology gradually replaced ancient alchemy technology, Professor Ka Zaire's position was actually a little awkward. However, this didn't prevent him from being proficient in magic technology. Professor Kazair didn't talk about too profound knowledge in the first lesson of Introduction to Magic, but only introduced some basic knowledge of magic cards to the students. Magic cards were divided into a total of 5 categories, namely, Sprite card, Magic card, Item card, Venue card, and Secret card. Apart from these, there were also God card and Mystery card. God card was a card with God's power. The enigmatic card referred to the unknown card. Professor Kazair mainly talked about Sprite card in this lesson. Sprite card was a magic card that could summon a magic fairy. Sprite card mainly had 7 data. First website. https://vipkanshu. VIP1. True name. Only by calling out the true name can the magic fairy be summoned. 2. Level. The fairy's level is represented by the number of stars. Ordinary summoning skills can only summon 1 star to 4-star fairies. Above 4-star, special summoning skills need to be upgraded. 3. Race. There are 15 races in the elf card. They are the human race, the demonic race, the dragon race, the angel race, the devil race, the undead race, the elemental race, the fairy race, the machine race, the insect race, the reptile race, the bird race, the animal race, the plant race, the fish race, and the phantom race. 4. Attributes. Sprite card has 20 attributes, namely, general, fire, water, electricity, grass, ice, fighting, poison, ground, flying, superpower, insect, rock, ghost, dragon, evil, steel, fairy, light, and dark. 5. Magic power. Magic power is the life value and the energy to use the ultimate skill. Once the magic power reaches 0, the magic fairy will disappear and cannot be summoned in a short period of time or before the magic power is replenished. 6. Attack and defense. The attack and defense of the fairy are represented by numerical values. 7. Ultimate skill. The skill of the fairy. Releasing the skill consumes magic power. White card has no skill, blue card has 1 skill, purple card has 2 skills, orange card has 3 skills. In order to explain more vividly, Professor Kazair took out an Sprite card as a demonstration. Furthermore, right in front of the freshman, he summoned a huge white python that emitted a freezing aura. The reptilian ice attribute 4-star giant python gave the freshman, who had just arrived but didn't know how to be respectful, a huge scare. Following the conclusion of the Introduction to Magic, the freshmen rushed out of the classroom as if they had been freed from their burdens, running towards the cafeteria in 2s and 3s. For students of this age, the Introduction to Magic class was indeed a bit boring. But Dake listened very carefully. Even before the class ended, he saw the notification of greed +1. Then he found out. The so-called greed was a kind of desire that came from the heart and transcended the ordinary. His desire to alleviate his current predicament was regarded as greed. Even if he paid attention during class, he couldn't do it. This completely overturned his theory of desertion. However, he did gain something from this lesson. Magic guide cards, especially Magic Guide elf cards, had so many races and attributes that they were beyond his imagination. Among them, the angel race and the illusionary god race were all races with divine power. The illusionary god race is said to be exclusive to the card of God, and there are only a few of them in the world. However, the angel race is considered a rare race. If I can get my hands on 1 or 2 Magic Guide elf cards of the angel race. It was common knowledge to use divine power to restrain the power of the demon god, no matter which world it was in. Dake felt that he might have found some clues. However, Professor Kazair told them very clearly that in the Shangmalian Academy, both teachers and students could only use the magic guide cards that they created themselves. In other words, if he wanted to purify himself through the angel race elf cards, he could only create them himself. This was simply too difficult. With a tinge of worry, Dake went to the cafeteria to have a simple but not simple lunch. He then returned to his bedroom and prepared to take a nap to replenish his energy in preparation for the magic medicine class in the afternoon. As Deanna had Luo Si as a friend, she did not pester him. This saved him a lot of worry. However, after sleeping for only half an hour, he suddenly felt a tug in his heart and woke up with a start. A notification of Sloth +1 quietly flashed across his mind. Damn. Fury +1. Can't I even take an afternoon nap? Dake looked at the clock on the wall and could not help but smile bitterly. Looks like I have to set an alarm for my afternoon nap in the future. It can't exceed half an hour. I can't sleep past 6 in the morning, and my afternoon nap can't exceed half an hour. What kind of top 10 young man is this? Dake summoned the system and looked at the great sins indicator. Pride, 93. Jealousy, 42. Fury, 95. Sloth, 72. Greed, 74. Gluttony, 54. Bliss, 75. Generally, it showed an upward trend. Especially the Fury indicator. Even though the Fury indicator was the one that fluctuated the most among the 7 great sins, once the anger subsided, it would more or less decrease. However, it was still 2 points more than the beginning. This was not a good sign. Dake simply got out of bed and put the textbook for the magic medicine class into his bag. He prepared to go to the common room to read for a while. Originally, he wanted to go to the library to look up information about the little demons so that he could complete his homework for the summoning class. However, thinking that there was only about an hour left before the afternoon class, he decided to go to the library after the magic medicine class. Who knows, he might have to go to the library to look up the homework assigned by the magic medicine professor. Wait, if I can't find anything after looking up the information for a long time, and I really want to finish my homework and continue to look up, will the greed indicator explode? It can't be. With a faint sense of worry, Dake welcomed the 3rd class of the day. Because he had prepared his lesson in moderation, his performance in the 3rd class was still good. Professor Thompson in the magic medicine class was also not the same type as Snape. Not only did he praise him, he even gave him extra credit. The creation of the magic card required the use of magic medicine, so he had to be serious. However, Professor Thompson did not mention the magic medicine that interested him, so he did not trigger the greed indicator. After the 3 classes of the day, whether it was the professor or the students, they all looked at him differently. Dake tried his best to minimize his interactions with his classmates and went to the library after class. The librarian of the library was the slightly chubby Miss Bella, but the daily librarian was a senior girl. This senior girl with long straight black hair really poked at Dake's good side. He did not dare to look at her for too long. After registering his name, he scurried into the library dejectedly. What a cute freshman. Panduola looked at the shy little boy with delicate features and could not help but cover her mouth and laugh softly. Little did she know that Dake, who was hiding behind the bookshelf, was holding his heart and panting heavily. The Bliss +1 indicator made him define this library as a demon's den. After him, AI Mamétis also entered the library. Chapter 10. Do you have a floor plan of the library? Dake took out his school card and infused it with magic. The school card sensed his thoughts and displayed the floor plan of the library on the card. Shang Malian Academy's library only had 1 floor, but each bookshelf was terrifyingly tall. The academy used a physical separation method to place the more profound books at the top. If one didn't have the ability to fly, they wouldn't be able to reach those profound books. But Dake's familiar had wings. This was an advantage. It was obviously a replacement for the owls, but most of the students' familiars didn't have wings and couldn't fly. This was too awkward. Dake found the area marked with familiar on the floor plan of the library and immediately walked over. The difference between a familiar and an ordinary magical fairy was that it could exist outside the magic card for a long time and didn't need to consume its master's magic. Magical fairies were different. No matter how powerful they were, their existence had a time limit. Remember the URL, VIP Kanchu. 6. Once this time limit was exceeded, they would begin to consume their own magic and disappear when their magic reached 0. Moreover, the intelligence level of magical fairies was 2, which was half a level lower than a familiar and belonged to the inferior golem level. Because the library was too big, even though Dake had a floor plan, he still spent nearly 10 minutes to find the bookshelf labeled Familiar. This entire bookshelf was filled with information related to familiars. Do I have to start looking from here? Dake couldn't help but raise his head. The bookshelf was so tall that he couldn't see the top. He even wanted to use the words, towering into the clouds, to describe this bookshelf. Just in this bookshelf, he didn't know how many books were stored. How are we supposed to find it? Do I have to go back and ask the librarian? Damn it, I have to take the risk of +1 just to do homework. Dake didn't want to take this loss. So he calmed down and prepared to slowly search from the bottom to the top. The little fiend belonged to the devil species, so he only needed to find books related to the devil species. But he soon found that the books in this bookshelf were all books such as Special Magical Spirits, Familiar, The Story of Familiar and Spirits That Must Be Told, A Guide to Making a Familiar, 101 Key Points to Learn to Make a Familiar, and so on. Could it be that I'm in the wrong place? Dark realized that his thoughts were probably in the wrong place. Information about the little fiends shouldn't be found in the familiar area. Instead, it should be found in the magic card or the magic fairy area. And it would be best if he could find one like the Illustrated Handbook of Elves that had a lot of contents. After thinking this through, Dake decisively opened the branch card to look for the Magic Guide Sprite Special area. In the end, there were dozens of rows of bookshelves with the Magic Elf label. Alright, this time not only can we not see the top, we also can't see the end in front of us. Dake sighed and began his long search. After spending a whole half an hour, Dake found a book called Into the Abyss hidden in a corner among thousands of books. His despairing heart suddenly became active. He quickly pulled out the 2-finger-thick book and quickly flipped through it. There was a table of contents. From the second page onward, it was a table of contents. It recorded thousands of types of fiends. Dake didn't bring the book to the reading room. Instead, he stood in front of the bookshelf and flipped through it. When he flipped back to the first page, a line of short sentences came into view. Walk into the abyss, gaze into the abyss. Dake wanted to skip over it, but he didn't expect his eyes to suddenly blur. The line of words suddenly trembled, and then transformed into a language that he had never seen before, but could understand. This method. Is it a secret ancient language? The secret ancient language was a kind of magic language that the ancient fiends used to pass down knowledge. This magic language was very special. The encryption level ranged from 1 to 12. It required the corresponding sequence of fiend bloodline to understand it. In this world, it was also a unique encryption method. Dake didn't know what sequence his bloodline was in, and he didn't know the encryption level of this magic language at all. But this didn't stop him from understanding this line of words. Dispel the fog and see the truth. The full moon will guide you. Dake blinked, then sneered and flipped to the table of contents. Then, he sorted according to the alphabetical order and found a fiend called Little Fiend Beast. After all, it was only the first-class homework for the first grade. Dake suspected that Professor Shi Erfu only wanted them to learn how to find information in the library. This was because the detailed information about the little fiend beast was clearly written in the Illustrated Handbook. As long as he copied it, he could complete the homework. He took out a pen and paper and quickly copied. The little fiend beast was a type of fiend with a dark attribute. It belonged to the 12th sequence, tamed demon in the demon sequence. It was the lowest inferior demon. In the Illustrated Handbook, it was described as the trash of the demon race. It was a nasty little demon. It had no power but liked to scheme and was good at flattering superior demons. It relied on kneeling and licking to survive in the demon realm. There was no superior demon. It was a magic elf. The little fiend beast's level was 1 star. Its magic power was 100, and its attack and defense were both 100. Its ultimate skill was Small Dart, which threw a huge syringe and drew the opponent's blood. Consumed 50 magic power. As a tamed demon, the little fiend beast's attack and defense were fixed at 100. Its magic power was 100. It didn't have an ultimate skill, but its flying speed was increased, and it had the tamed demon's exclusive skill, tracking. Basically, most tamed demons had this number. They were good at sending and receiving letters and could replace owls or coos. Dark quickly finished copying the information and placed the book into the abyss, back on the bookshelf as if nothing had happened. Then he found a book called Magic Elf Anthology, and walked into the reading room. There was no homework for the Magic Elf class and the Potion class, so he was free this afternoon until bedtime. The freshmen liked to wander around the academy after finishing their homework, or play some small games in the common room. On the other hand, some people liked to play to their heart's content before doing their homework. Dake didn't have the interest to wander around the castle, nor did he have the idea to socialize too much. The library was probably the most suitable place for him. Using the tea set in the corner, he poured a cup of special black tea that neutralized the aroma and placed it on the table in the corner. Then, he opened the Magic Elf Anthology, and kept the mentality of reading entertainment magazines as he flipped through the books. Dake deeply felt that this kind of Buddhist life was the most suitable for him. In the huge Shangmalian Academy, there was only this small corner that could give him some peace of mind. Very good. Not only did the index of major sins not increase, but it also decreased by 1 point fury and 1 point sloth. Chapter 11. Just as Dake was casually absorbing the knowledge, Ai Ma Métis walked into the reading room while muttering to herself. She came to the library almost at a slower pace than Dark, but she spent more time among the stacks than he did. Ai Ma came from a scholarly family. Her father taught children in the church, and her mother was a disciple of a sage. After the annihilation of the demon race, the human race entered the Renaissance stage. With the Valkyrie becoming famous as the representative of women, the right of women to speak increased unprecedentedly. Many excellent women appeared in all walks of life. Even their boxing skills were not inferior to men. Not to mention that the existence of a magister had nothing to do with gender. The existence of a magister also made the status of women higher. Ai Ma was influenced by her parents since she was young. She loved books and had a strong thirst for knowledge. She also inherited her mother's independent personality. It wasn't that she wasn't good at making friends, but after entering the school, she felt that the boys and girls in her grade were too childish. She had no interest in interacting with them. Moreover, the Shangmalian had the largest library in the kingdom. This was the paradise of her dreams. She was immersed in the excitement of seeing the precious books and couldn't help but spend more time in the bookshelves. Different from Dake, who only took one book, Ai Ma took out a whole stack of books. 1 second to remember https://m. Vipkanshu. Vaja swayed as she carried the book forward, a slight blush on her face. The journey was smooth. Ai Ma found an empty table near Dake. She put down the books and stacked them high. Then she couldn't wait to read the books. She was so engrossed that she didn't notice Dake, who was on her left. The two new students were only 2 to 3 meters away from each other, reading their books peacefully. The library provided snacks to satisfy hunger, but unlike the unscented black tea, all the snacks could only be eaten in the dessert room. Dake went to eat 2 syrup pancakes at around 6 o'clock. He didn't dare to eat his favorite chocolate sponge cake and only drank a small cup of milk. Then he returned to the reading room. The selection of magical fairies was also an illustrated handbook. It introduced interesting fairies. It was very complicated and the description was very humorous. There were also colorful illustrations. Dake gradually found that reading books for entertainment was different from reading textbooks. As long as there wasn't a strong purpose, greed wouldn't be triggered. Moreover, the selection of magical fairies also had a lot of knowledge. It wasn't lazy. Then he quickly realized that if there was a light novel here, he would probably die miserably. Not wanting to wait for a second longer would be seen as greed. There was no point in peeking, and the idiot text was lazy. If he were to read a novel, He would probably be punished for 2 crimes. Wasn't this too terrifying? Around 7 o'clock. A group of noisy, naughty children poured into the library. White Gouda was in the middle. The new students of the Night Academy excitedly asked the hero child all kinds of questions. They didn't realize what kind of negative impact their behavior would have on the quiet library. Luo Boat was excluded, like an ugly duckling abandoned by its companions. The two summoned their familiars and were about to go to the library to look up information. However, unlike Dake's guess, White's familiar wasn't a stag, and Luo Boat's familiar wasn't a hound. The librarian, Panduola Doragon, looked at the group of unruly children and couldn't help but frown. Then White and the others only felt a breeze, and everyone's voices disappeared. Silence card. White suddenly shut his mouth. Then he saw the girl behind the counter with a cold expression. The girl's skin was abnormally white, and her long hair cascaded down like a black waterfall. There was a heart-shaped scale-like thing under the corner of her eye. She leaned forward slightly, and her motherly body was squeezed out of shape by the triangle formed by her body and the table. Her bulging back outlined a perfect arc, and her legs under her skirt were astonishingly long. "Mama!" The silence card's effect disappeared, and White's subconscious words were abnormally clear and abrupt. Everyone suddenly turned to stare at him. White's cheeks instantly flushed red, and he wanted to lower his head to the girl's chest. "The girls. Come here to register," Panduola said expressionlessly. These new students gave her a bad impression. Weren't new students supposed to be cute, immature, and shy like the blonde boy from before? The kind of boy who couldn't help but lower his head when a big sister approached him and reveal a shy expression like a small animal. Slurp, Panduola immediately pursed her lips and glared at the naughty children in front of her even more fiercely. Especially the leader of the group. "What the hell was Mama? Do I look like his mother? Could it be? If he's so shy at such a young age, what will happen in the future?" Panduola's first impression of White was terrible. White's face was still red even after he entered the library. The other students all walked away, and only Luo Boat was left by his side. Luo Boat couldn't help but ask, "White, why did you call her Mama at that time?" White took a deep breath and fished out an exquisite pendant from his collar. This was his most precious possession. Click. He opened the pendant and revealed the photo inside. "This is my mama. I look at it every night and imagine what my mama looks like." Luo Boat hurriedly moved closer. For some reason, this photo only had a silhouette, and it was taken from a distance. Although the silhouette was a bit blurry, one could still see White's mother's curvy figure and her iconic long black hair. She did look a bit like that senior sister. Luo Boat thought for a moment and suggested, "How about I help you ask that senior sister's name?" White hesitated for a moment and finally shook his head. "Forget it." Then he began to look for information in silence. It was always hard to guess the thoughts of young men and women. For example, although White said, "Forget it," he was still thinking about it in his heart. Or it was like AI Ma finally realized that the person reading to her left was Dake. She felt that this person was so annoying that he kept wandering around in her field of vision. But she couldn't help but feel a trace of joy in her heart. After all, apart from the freshmen of the magic school, there were few people who studied as seriously as they did. Dake was the only person she didn't think was so childish. 9 o'clock in the evening. Dake looked at the clock, closed the Magic Guide anthology, and got up to leave the table. Ai Ma was still reading seriously, and Dake pretended not to see her. He found the bookshelf according to the number he remembered and put the Magic Guide anthology back in its original place. Then he glanced at the other bookshelf. Into the Abyss had been taken away. Chapter 12. Tuesday's classes were dueling, arithmetic, and magic history. The first-year dueling professor, Pawa Cheong-si, was a dueling master with 1/16 of the giant's bloodline. Not only that, but she was also the head of the aristocratic academy. By the way, The head of the Knight Academy was Sarah Shi Erfu, who taught summoning. The head of the Sorcery Academy was Professor Lili Laplace, who taught arithmetic. The head of the Fools Academy was Didi Maxi Wei, who taught magic history. Just like in the dating game, all 4 heads were female. In the Shang Malian Academy, from the name of the academy to the head of the academy to the professors, there was an overabundance of females and a lack of males. Professor Cheong Si, who had 1/16 of the giant's bloodline, was a size larger than the average human. She had short hair, strong muscles, bronze skin, and overdeveloped secondary sexual characteristics. She was full of health. Although Dake was not interested in this professor who was over 2 meters tall and carried her own basketball, she seemed to be quite popular in the academy. Website: https://vipkanshu. It was said that Professor Cheong Si's giant bloodline came from the giant's royal family, and her father was an orthodox human noble. Although she was not a pure race, in the sense of being a noble, she couldn't be any purer. Among the Shang Malian senior students, there were many admirers of Professor Cheong Si, regardless of gender. It could be said that they worshipped the strong. Whether it was the aristocratic academy or the Knight Academy freshmen, they were all looking forward to Professor Cheong Si's dueling class. However, in this class, Professor Cheong Si only explained some very basic theoretical knowledge. This included the rules of the dueling competition, tactics, the combination of various magic cards, and the mutual restraint between racial attributes. The good news was that the dueling club's recruitment would be held this Friday afternoon. The bad news was that in order to join the club, one had to have at least a set of 20 magic cards. This bad news made the freshmen who were looking forward to the duel break down. It was only the second day of school. Who would have 20 magic cards? But then again, if one did not even have a set of cards, how could one join the dueling club? The arithmetic class that followed was even more boring and difficult than the duel class. The freshmen were suffering unspeakably. They all said that this was definitely the most difficult class in the first grade. Deanna said that she was dreaming the whole class. Although Luo Si was listening to the class attentively, he had a confused look on his face. It was obvious that he didn't understand half of it. As for Dake wasn't listening at all. This kind of elementary math class was an insult to his IQ. Pride +1. Professor Lili Laplace, who taught arithmetic, was said to be a fairy, an alien race that was related to the elves. Like the elves, they had a long lifespan and wisdom accumulated over time. Professor Lili Laplace prefers students to call her Professor Lili. She was the same as most of the fairies. Her body's growth stopped at the age of 11 or 12. She looked even younger than the freshmen. She was about the same height as Deanna. In addition, she had a pair of dragonfly wings and liked to bare her feet. Her feet never touched the ground. The history of magic professor for the 3rd class, Professor Didi Maxi Wei, was also a fairy. However, she had a pair of butterfly wings and looked very old. There were deep wrinkles on her forehead. Professor Didi's teaching style was the same as Professor Lili's. They both followed the textbook to the letter. They might have profound knowledge and profound wisdom, but they were not suitable for teaching. The history of magic could be said to be the most boring class. Fortunately, Professor Didi was very kind and amiable. Even if a student accidentally fell asleep in class, he would only knock on their head and deduct 5 or 10 marks, nothing more. Professor Didi was also in charge of the astronomy class on Wednesday night. However, the astronomy class was an interest class. It would only be held when Professor Didi gave notice. In other words, there would be no astronomy class for the first month of school. Similarly, there was also the Warcraft class on Friday. It was said that the Warcraft class on Friday would only start next semester, and it was very likely that it would be delayed. First-year students were not allowed to enter the underground city outside the castle, so it was very difficult for them to learn Warcraft. In this way, there were only 6 classes left in the week: Summoning, Introduction to Magic, Potionology, Dueling, Arithmetic, and History of Magic. It could be said that it was very easy. Library. Dake finished registering before Panduola arrived and snatched yesterday's seat in the reading room. Then, he took out the problem book for the arithmetic class and began to do the questions. These questions were too easy. Relying on the multiplication table, Dark swept through everything in his path. When Ai Ma sat down behind him, he was already halfway done. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the entire exercise book was completed. This meant that the arithmetic homework for this semester was basically done. Dake closed the problem book and placed it on the top left corner of the table with satisfaction. Because he was calm enough when doing the questions, the greed indicator did not trigger. But just as he was feeling happy because of this, the pride +1 appeared in his eyes. Does this mean that I can become arrogant and complacent while doing elementary math? Dake was shocked. Ai Ma was also shocked. Ai Ma could not imagine how Dake could finish the problem book in such a short time. We are all first-year students. How can you be so awesome? Shocked, Ai Ma redoubled her efforts to teach herself arithmetic. After finishing his homework, Dake looked at the pride indicator that did not go down for some reason. Although he did not reveal the anxiety in his heart, he could not stop it. Am I really that arrogant? Dake began to ask himself. He had been asking questions for a whole month. Dake did not even know how he managed to survive this month. But there was a saying that life was like being targeted by a crazy woman. Since he could not resist, he had to learn to enjoy it. Dake became the star that attracted the most attention among the first-year students. Every morning, he would wake up at 6 o'clock and appear in the common room at 6:15 o'clock sharp. His familiar would go around the outside of the castle and fly in through the ventilation of the cafeteria kitchen. The halfling chef really liked this little demon that always came to give him small gifts. Although those gifts were pebbles picked up by the river, flowers picked by the roadside, lucky grass under the setting sun, beautiful colorful feathers. But these were the best gifts that a little familiar could find. The halfling would pin the flowers in his hair, copy the lucky grass into cards, and store the pebbles and glass shards in jars. Every morning the little demon would fly in on time. Then, they would hand the basket of snacks and milk that they had already prepared to the little demon. The little demon would use its 2 thick claws to grab the basket and steadily fly back to the tower dormitory of the aristocrats. Dake was already used to eating breakfast in the common room. Eating while reading could effectively reduce the probability of gluttony and greed being triggered. This was definitely a statement from his own experience. After eating, the little demon would send the basket back to the kitchen. Dake would continue to read in the common room. Only when the number of people here gradually increased did he go to the classroom for the first class. At first, he was always the first to arrive at the classroom, but later he found that as long as there was a class with the Night Academy, there would be another person who came earlier than him. Fortunately, the first female lead in the game was still young and was not in his hunting range. Compared to the more troublesome Deanna, Ai Ma was like a harmless kitten on the roadside. Deanna gradually became more and more clingy to him. The cause was arithmetic homework. Deanna really had no talent in arithmetic, and Luo Si was not much better. So these two girls had a bright idea and found Dake, who was gradually showing the temperament of a top student. Dake had no choice but to teach them a secret skill: vertical calculation. Vertical calculation meant that during the calculation process, there would be a vertical calculation to do the calculation, which would make the calculation easier. This secret skill was directly learned by Professor Li Li and spread throughout the Shangmalian. For knowledgeable little fairies, this kind of calculation was not necessary at all, but for beginners, it was like rain from the sky. Professor Li Li even named it Dake's vertical calculation, and added a whole 50 points to Dake. This made Dake very troubled. His pride index increased again. Dake had been very careful to control his emotions, but the crime index could always surprise him when he was not paying attention. Obviously, he had been trying to avoid social interactions and pursue a Buddhist life with no desires, no sadness and no joy. However, the more he was like this, The more outstanding Dake was among the childish and naughty freshmen. No one cared about the rumors before entering the school anymore. Everyone had a new definition of Dake Dimming based on seeing is believing. Diligent, wise, handsome, although a little cold, wasn't that the image of a person in a high position? In comparison, the other son of the kingdom's double swords, White Gouda, paled in comparison. White did not receive an elite preschool education. He only learned to read in the church and memorized addition and subtraction tables. Although he was very smart, he was still a teenager and was always dragged around by Luo boat to play. As the saying goes, one is marked by the company one keeps. Without the supervision of Ai Ma, the Miss Know-It-All, White was only left with the dark and swarthy Luo boat. Naturally, he was also dyed black. In addition, when he was in class, he was always in a daze because of a confused state of mind, and his studies were getting worse and worse. Seeing that the treatment of the protagonist and the villain in the original novel was about to be reversed, a card game called Love Divination suddenly became popular among the first-year students. But this had nothing to do with Dake, who had a closed social circle. He still maintained his daily pace. Every morning after the second class, he would go to the cafeteria and eat a moderated lunch. Basically, he would return to the common lounge 5 minutes past 12. Next, he would make a cup of coffee and continue reading. If there was homework that could be done directly, he would do it first. After finishing his homework, he would continue reading. The little devil monster would bring some biscuits and snacks. They were all small snacks that would not trigger gluttony. And the books he was reading were no longer textbooks, but books about magic conduction and magic potion that he borrowed from the library. Because he was occasionally too engrossed, greed was slowly increasing. After the third class in the afternoon, he would go to the library as usual. After avoiding the first surprise, Bliss +1 would no longer trigger Bliss +1 when they met eyes. However, senior sister Pandora's body was really too weak, which always made him run away in a panic. Occasionally, he would hear light laughter behind him. The meaning was unclear. There were a total of 7 values. Sloth was the easiest to control. Dake did not expect himself to be so persistent. After a month of hard work, sloth did not increase but decreased. The second was jealousy. The first-year textbooks were simply too simple. With his demon god bloodline awakening and his magic power increasing day by day, not only did he lead the class in arithmetic, he was also one of the best in summoning, magic manipulation, and potions classes. Only White, who had inherited the hero's bloodline, could compare with him in terms of talent. But White was not serious. Therefore, Dake could not find anyone to be jealous of. Apart from occasionally getting emotional when he saw the freshmen having fun or talking about youthful topics, jealousy did not increase, but it did not decrease either. But as time passed, the number of times his emotions got the better of him. The other emotion that had accumulated in his heart was fury. Yes, he was always able to suppress fury in time, but the anger toward the demon god's bloodline and the demon god's support system had always been rooted in his heart, and it was getting deeper and deeper. One day it suddenly exploded. Dake was very worried about this. Greed was still within his control, but there was also a hidden danger of it suddenly exploding. In comparison, bliss was not that big of a hidden danger, but because Deanna was getting more and more clingy, from being clingy when school started to being clingy with her best friend now. Dake Dimming. He suffered the consequences of his own actions. Every time Deanna came over to ask him about homework, he could not help but want to pinch her pink and tender cheeks. As a result, bliss improved a lot. The key was that this thing only increased and did not decrease. Dake once wondered if he could use Sage Mode to get rid of it. But he did not dare to try because he was afraid that it would explode. Unexpectedly, pride was the hardest to control. Dake originally thought that it was the easiest sin to control. After all, he had the memories of his previous life. Even if he was temporarily affected by his personality in this life, He would be able to wear off that arrogance bit by bit. However, he never expected that the memories of his previous life were the real cancer. Looking at the indicator of pride, which had successfully broken through 100 points at the end of the month, turning from a ripe red color to a dark purple color, he felt very uncomfortable. On Friday afternoon of the 4th week of school, the freshmen were allowed to leave the castle for the first time and enter the only trading and leisure area of Shangmalian, Traveler's Street. Dake silently counted the credits he had that were much more than the average freshman. He knew that he did not have much time left. Chapter 13. The classes on Friday were very relaxing. There was only one dual class in the morning. From noon onwards, the passage to Traveler's Street would open until midnight on Sunday. The passage would only close again. During this period, every student in the college could freely enter and exit Traveler's Street. Not only the freshmen who had just received permission, but the seniors who had been cooped up in the castle for a whole week also flocked out. Although the Shangmalian provided all kinds of daily necessities for free, other than that, they had to buy everything on Traveler's Street. The students could use their credits to spend as much as they wanted. Whether it was all kinds of weird candies and toys, beautiful clothes and jewelry, or even cute dolls. Of course, most of them were all kinds of magic potions and other materials needed to make magic cards. The professors of the academy would give the senior students homework that would take a week or even a month to complete. The materials needed for the homework would have to be bought at the hotel. Other than that, there were also students who would make their own magic potions, props, and half-finished magic cards and sell them at Traveler's Street. Remember the website, Vipkanshu. VIP. The seniors who were allowed to enter the underground city could hunt magical beasts and obtain materials to sell to the merchants on Traveler's Street. The merchants would also pay with credits. In Traveler's Street, the actual value of one credit was 16 holy coins. The exchange rate would be adjusted according to the market. The freshmen in their first month of school did not know that they could earn 160 holy coins worth of virtual tokens in each class as long as they listened attentively. According to the calculation of 12 classes a week, this was the standard monthly income of 7,680 holy coins. Today, Traveler's Street would give some students who did not pay attention in class a heavy blow. Dake, do you want to go together? No, I have something to do today. Then I'll leave with Rose first. I heard that there's a strange candy shop on Traveler's Street. I've been wanting to take a look. Anna held Luo C's arm and rushed out in a hurry. Dake shook his head. He had a strong purpose today. Before heading to Traveler's Street, he took out a notebook from his bag and carefully looked at the various items in it. Vampire fangs. The fangs of a vampire can pierce into a person's blood vessels and calm them down. The side effect is the bliss of having one's blood sucked. Courtesy of modesty. The hat of the nobles of the demon realm. No matter how rude a person is after wearing it, they will become humble and polite. However, after taking it off, they will become furious. Tears of the ocean. Tears of the mermaid. The potion made from it has the effect of slimming down, but it is actually achieved by inducing anorexia. Margaret's red dancing shoes. The dancing shoes of the mysterious witch, Margaret. Wearing them will allow you to dance the most perfect dance in the world. The price is that you will never be able to take them off. Katerina's poisonous apple. An apple planted by Queen Katerina in the back garden of the palace. It can absorb the desire of jealousy and turn it into a poison that can cause people to fall into an eternal slumber. Only a kiss filled with love can wake them up. Grandit's gold coin. A gold coin that has inherited Grandit's will. The person who holds it will become extremely stingy and greedy. They will view money as their life and their wives and daughters as dirt. Voodoo doll. A cursed doll made from intense jealousy. Poking a needle on the doll will cause the person to feel intense pain. Pot of forbidden desire. Absorbs desire, allowing the person to enter a state of no sadness or joy. The side effect is that even the desire to think will be lost. Ring of the stars. the ring of the great magician of the stars. You can see a corner of the universe and feel your own insignificance. You will even be frightened to the point of collapse. Nightmare worm. Can enter dreams and absorb the desire of humans. The price is that a hole will be drilled in the brain. Magic brain dropper. Absorbs a small amount of brain matter, including emotions, desire, knowledge, and other things. It is often used in the creation of advanced magic cards. Excessive use will cause indirect memory loss. Holy cross. Can purify the soul and make the wearer's thoughts pure. The side effect is that the brain will be eroded. Requiem bell. Shake the bell and make the person calm. Even if the person dies, there will be no fluctuations. Moon goddess incense. Light an incense in the study room. It can make the soul more pure, throw away distracting thoughts, and increase the efficiency of studying. God's wrath. A magic wand from the old era. It can transform anger into magic flames. As long as the anger is not extinguished, the magic flames will not be extinguished. The entire notebook was filled with records of related items that Dake had extracted from various books in the past month. These items could be magic tools left behind by the previous generation. They could also have been refined into magic item cards. Regardless of which, they had a necessary effect on the resistance of the 7 major sins. However, as the saying went, one had to pay to get something. Many things had side effects that were difficult to ignore. The price to pay was also very serious. At present, there were very few items that did not have side effects on the surface. Among them, the items that Dake wanted the most, the ones that the side effects were acceptable, and the ones that were most likely to be obtained from Traveler Street were the alchemy tool, the magic brain dropper, and the top-notch luxury item, the moon goddess incense. Although Dake believed that the moon goddess incense might be able to easily guide the soul to have an endless thirst for knowledge, this was obviously very dangerous and needed to be experimented with. Therefore, the purpose of his trip to Traveler Street today was to obtain the magic brain dropper. The magic brain dropper was an alchemy tool that could extract substances from the brain. It was suitable for the precision production of high-level magic cards. Dake had read many books and even asked Professor Kazair about magic. He was very confident that it should be able to effectively extract emotions and thirst. The premise was that it required an extremely high level of skill and could not be used frequently. If he really could not buy it from Traveler Street, he would have to think of a way to get it from Professor Kazair's experiment. Although it could not be used frequently if he paid attention to it, it should be able to be used in an emergency. The pressing problem at the moment was to absorb some of pride. After the freshmen who were entrenched at the entrance of the castle finally disappeared, Dake took a step forward and calmly and elegantly walked towards the castle gate. The aristocratic education that was engraved in his bones allowed him to remain elegant even when his heart was anxious. The passage to Traveler Street was set up in the pavilion in the middle of the lake outside the castle. After passing through the long plant-style bridge, he arrived at the beautiful pavilion in the middle of the lake. Dake habitually observed the environment. This pavilion in the middle of the lake was considered spacious. Other than the circle of seats at the edge of the pavilion, there were a total of 8 sets of stone tables and chairs. There was a line of words carved on the stone pillar directly opposite. If we work hard to find it, there will always be room for improvement waiting for us somewhere. Dake blinked and saw someone sitting on a stone stool. Then, with a twist of his buttocks, he suddenly disappeared. There was also someone who twisted for a long time, but what should have been there was still there. It seems that the entrance to the passage can be moved. There are 8 stone tables, and each table has 8 stone stools. Only by choosing the correct 8 stone stools can one enter Traveler Street. He glanced at the red-faced redneck and white and sat down on a stone stool at another stone table that no one had sat on before. He was very patient. When the people at the other tables had failed, he slightly twisted his buttocks and disappeared. Chapter 14. It was the same lake, the same pavilion in the middle of the lake. However, after walking out of the pavilion in the middle of the lake and passing through the garden bridge, they arrived at a whole new world. What greeted them was... Yes, it was the air of freedom. Oh, greater than overikatu. Students no longer needed to abide by the old school rules. A magical card from the costume change series could make you colorful. Get lost. School uniform. Dake even saw a female senior who usually liked to pretend to be serious scream on the spot. Her school uniform, which covered every important part of her body, instantly turned into a black dress with bubble sleeves and lace, revealing a large part of her shoulders and collarbones. Another senior, who had a watermelon hairstyle and looked honest, even combed his hair with a magical card when he walked down the bridge, completing the transformation from a watermelon hairstyle to a swept-back hairstyle. His school uniform also turned into a small suit that showed his figure. The magical card in his hand turned into a bright red rose. Remember in a second. https://vipkanshu. Vey put the red rose in his chest pocket and walked with a majestic gait, without any trace of his previous rustic appearance. Costume change, sightseeing, dating, shopping, drinking, singing and dancing. Traveler Street was like a land of fairies that completely deviated from Shangmalian. It had everything that Shangmalian did not have. And if you wanted to enjoy all of this, you only needed a little bit of credits. Although there would be a school championship competition every school year, no one would start moderating at the beginning of the semester for the competition at the end of the school year. Moreover, there was always a saying among Shangmalian that was not so applicable to the general public. The more you use, the more you earn. However, because there were indeed a few role models, many people habitually used this as an excuse to persuade themselves to spend to their heart's content. Of course, there was also a portion of people who could not even spend to their heart's content. When Dake took a small detour around Traveler Street and saw White and Luo boat again, the two were walking out of a toy store dejectedly. Obviously, their credits that had been deducted were not enough to buy the toys they wanted. Dake didn't have the luxury to pay attention to others, so he only glanced at them before leaving. As a result, he did not see the other student who happened to pass by, Ai Ma Métis, get entangled by two inferior students. Ai Ma had originally come to Traveler Street to look for some miscellaneous books that the Academy's library didn't have. However, she suddenly saw Dake, who seemed to be searching for something, and subconsciously followed him. In the end, he fell into the entanglement of White and Luo boat. The angry Ai Ma said angrily, "So, isn't it your own problem that you don't have enough credits? A normal person would have 480 credits even if they didn't receive any credits. What about you guys?" White said awkwardly, "Me, 250. Luo Boat's face turned red again. "Ai Ma, we just want to borrow 5 credits from you. It's easy for you, isn't it? When class starts on Monday, we'll pay you back." White glanced at the new magic chess placed in the store and couldn't help but say, "Just 5 credits." Ai Ma looked at this student who was known as the Brave Ones, and suddenly felt a little sad. Then a thought emerged in her mind. She couldn't help but frown and suddenly said seriously, "I can lend you the credits, but you have to pay me back double. And for every day that it's delayed, you have to pay me double the credits. The second day is double the first day, the third day is double the second day, and so on. I only accept one payment. If you agree, I'll lend you the credits, and I'll use my school card as proof." Luo Boat immediately agreed without hesitation. "I'll pay you back 10 credits tomorrow, 20 credits the day after tomorrow, and 40 credits on Monday. That's 2 classes per person, no problem." Although White felt that something was wrong, his eagerness to buy the magic chess made him subconsciously ignore this strangeness. With a school card as proof, the two signed the contract and immediately rushed into the toy store to buy the latest magic chess that could sing and dance rap. Meanwhile, after shopping for a long time, Dake finally found a store that specialized in magic instruments. Morgan's store. Traveler Street was full of all kinds of grocery stores, and many cheap things could be bought in any grocery store. But the magic brain pipette was an alchemy tool with high professional requirements, and the price was also very expensive, so it could only be bought in specialized stores. Dake looked for a long time before he found Morgan's store in the gap between two accessory stores. He pushed open the wooden door that had been in disrepair for a long time and suddenly smelled a rotten damp smell. "Little thing, don't mess around. You can't afford to pay for it if you break it." One-eyed Morgan behind the counter only needed to take a look to know that Dake was a freshman. And how many credits could a freshman earn in a month? Morgan couldn't be more clear about this. He unceremoniously asked him to leave. "The cheapest thing in our store costs over 1,000 credits, which is not something a freshman like you can afford." Dake glanced at the test tube set on the shelf and suddenly asked, "Just this set of test tubes costs 1,000 credits? This?" One-eyed Morgan was really stumped. After a long time he said angrily, "Why isn't this set of thermostatic magic test tubes worth 1,000 credits? Dake, then what about this beaker, this flask, and this evaporator?" One-eyed Morgan suddenly slapped the table and stood up. "None of your business." Dake shook his head. It seemed that the boss had a bad temper and was a little childish, or maybe it just happened to be one of those days of the month. He didn't argue with One-eyed Morgan anymore and looked at the shelf. There were test tubes and beakers, so there was no reason why there weren't any pipettes, right? Flame crucible, demon spirit alcohol lamp, magic separator, transformative glass rod magic pipette. This magic pipette should be a low-grade product of the magic brain pipette, which could only absorb a little magic. A pipette was a short tube with a constriction at one end and a rubber ball at the other end. It was used to measure liquid by the number of drops. But in the process of making magic cards, it was usually used to absorb magic, knowledge, thoughts, and even souls. Legend had it that there would be a magus who would inject his soul into a magic card to create a magic fairy with a standard intelligence level of 3.0. The magic brain pipette that Dake wanted was a grade lower than the soul pipette. It wasn't the kind of rare product that couldn't be bought. But there really wasn't one on the shelf. He had to walk to the counter and wake up One-eyed Morgan, who was awkwardly pretending to be asleep. "Hello, boss. Do you have a magic brain pipette?" One-eyed Morgan didn't even raise his head. "What would a freshman like you do with that thing?" Dake still maintained the necessary courtesy. "Experiment." One-eyed Morgan raised his head with a strange look, but he still said, "Wait, I'll go inside and take a look." A moment later he really took out a magic brain pipette, but it wasn't in good condition. Chapter 15. Dake glanced at the brain dropper in One-eyed Morgan's hand and couldn't help but frown. "Why is this brain dropper so sickly?" One-eyed Morgan casually said, "It's been here for a long time." Then he added, "You can't afford it even if it's good." He really didn't say anything nice, but only retorted. Dake had gone through a month of tempering, so he wouldn't get angry over such a trivial matter. "Let me see it." One-eyed Morgan handed over the demon brain dropper. Dake pinched the brain dropper's neck and pulled it close to his eyes for a closer look. The brain of this brain dropper had already aged. It didn't look like it had been here for a long time. He had carefully studied this thing before. The brain dropper was alive, although its intelligence level was only 0.1, which was basically the same as a paramecium. As long as it was alive, it would grow old and die. The normal lifespan of a brain dropper was 10 years. In other words, this brain dropper probably didn't have much longer to live. The first website was https://vipkanshu. VIP. He couldn't help but ask, "How many years has it lived?" Only then did One-eyed Morgan look at Dark in the eye. Unexpectedly he said a very accurate number, 8 years and 6 months. More than 10 months left. That's not unacceptable. Dake thought carefully for a moment, then raised his head and said, "Name a price." One-eyed Morgan grinned. "Qinghui 1,000 credits. In fact, an alchemy tool like the brain dropper, even if it only had a year left to live, was not something that could be bought with a mere 1,000 credits. The reason One-eyed Morgan gave such a price was simply to prove that Dake couldn't afford 1,000 credits. In other words, it was to disgust him. But Dake didn't know about this. He thought it was a normal price, and even counteroffered a few times. Seeing that One-Eyed Morgan was determined to keep the price, Dake had no choice but to say, 1,000 it is. Wrap it up. Only then did One-Eyed Morgan say suspiciously, pay first. Dake took out his school card and looked at him. One-Eyed Morgan hesitated for a moment before taking out the merchant cards that Shang Malian specially prepared for merchants. Dake placed the branch card on top of the merchant card. With a thought, he transferred 1,000 credits from the branch card to One-Eyed Morgan's merchant card. One-Eyed Morgan picked up the merchant card and looked at it carefully. His gaze became even weirder. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't figure out how a new student who had only started school for less than a month could get 1,000 credits. However, the water that was poured out and the words that were spoken were true. He had never thought of going back on his word. Then, he took out an empty bottle from the cabinet and filled it with water. Then, he put the magic brain dropper into the water, screwed the cap on, and handed it to Dake. Take it. Dake blinked, took the bottle, and turned to leave. But just as he reached the door, One-Eyed Morgan's voice came from behind him. Wait, what's your name? Dake Dimming. 1,000 credits wasn't a small burden for Dake. From the moment he planned to go to Traveler Street to buy the items he needed, Dake had started to accumulate credits with a purpose. It was too easy for him to get credits in the first grade. Even a new student from the magical engineering department wouldn't be able to steal a single credit from him. His only competitor was AI Ma Métis. Every time the professor asked a question, AI Ma would always rush to answer. Dake was fed up with this, so he changed his method and helped the professor mark homework to get extra credits. Especially in arithmetic class, Professor Li couldn't wait to give him the podium. So, he got a total of 1,200 credits in the first month. Even AI Ma, who was also rich in credits, couldn't be compared to him. After spending 1,000 credits, Dake, who still had 200 credits left, went to the grocery store and bought a set of basic experiment tools. And his trip to Traveler Street came to an end. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. While most of the new students were still lingering in Traveler Street, Dake had already returned to his dorm. He had to learn how to use the magic brain dropper correctly before the end of the weekend. Before this, he had already borrowed the relevant books from the library and read them for a while. This book was hidden on the 23rd shelf, Guide to Using the Magic Brain Dropper. It described in detail how to use the magic brain dropper. Not only did it include the method to extract a specific memory, but it also included how to adjust one's emotions so that the emotions could be more easily absorbed. Using the magic brain dropper was a very dangerous thing to do. It required extremely high magic manipulation skills and a certain amount of knowledge. If one wasn't careful, it was very likely that part of one's memory would be permanently extracted, directly causing amnesia. In history, there was even a very unlucky magus who accidentally absorbed the words sorrow from happiness, anger, sorrow, and joy. From then on, he couldn't feel sorrow anymore. And the safest and simplest way to use it was called the dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. In short, it was to press the tip of the magic brain dropper against the temple and then gently squeeze the magic brain that replaced the rubber cap. The emotions, desires, and other things that naturally overflowed would be absorbed into the magic brain. As long as one didn't make too much contact with the brain's thoughts, the danger would be minimized. Dake was preparing to use this method. This was probably the only method he could use at the moment. After placing the other prepared instruments on the low cabinet beside his bed, Dake lay down and first calmed his mind according to the method taught in the book. Only after his breathing had calmed down could he focus his energy and stimulate a specific emotion or desire through the activity in his mind. But he omitted this step. Instead, he directly picked up the magic brain dropper and pressed the tip against his temple. He squeezed the magic brain with 2 fingers and then released it. An extremely thin black line was sucked out of the brain just like that. As expected, I don't need to focus my energy to stimulate emotions at all. My pride has already leaked out. Dake thought silently. He didn't know whether to be happy or not. In any case, he definitely couldn't be angry. System, expand the indicators. Yes. A moment later. 7 indicators appeared in Dake's vision. Pride, 112. Jealousy, 44. Fury, 96. Sloth, 60. Greed, 82. Gluttony, 58. Bliss, 90. Pride was a school of its own. As the black lines were sucked out one by one, pride finally went from 112 to 111. Eek! The magic brain dropper suddenly screamed. Dake quickly stopped pressing. He had read in the book that the magic brain dropper screams meant that its magic brain's capacity had reached its limit. In other words, there's just enough space to store a little of pride. He carefully sat up and went to the low cabinet after getting off the bed. He moved a semi-finished blank magic card from the low cabinet to the middle. This sort of semi-finished blank magic card required extremely high craftsmanship. Moreover, it was very time-consuming to make it, just like sculpting. Therefore, most of the sorcerers would choose to buy it directly from the shop. The blank magic card in Traveler Street was priced at 10 credits. According to the exchange rate, it was more expensive than the market. The difference in price would attract more traveling merchants to Traveler Street. Dake only bought 5 blank magic cards. He pressed the tip of the magic brain dropper against the blank magic card. Then, ignoring the magic brain dropper's screams, he squeezed the magic brain hard. Eek eek eek. The pride stored in the magic brain was instantly spat out on the blank magic card. The originally snow-white surface of the card suddenly spread out as if a drop of dark gold ink had been dripped into it. Chapter 16. The ripples of the thick ink spread outwards in circles. In an instant, the entire magic card was dyed a thick dark gold. When the dark gold color on the magic card became even and smooth, Dake immediately followed the knowledge he had learned in the study of magic. He picked up a magic pen and drew the number 7 refining formation on the front of the magic card. This was a simple method to make a type of emotion series magic card. It could create magic cards with many emotions such as sadness, happiness, anger. Using this type of magic card could let people experience the corresponding emotions. Among them, the happiness card was the most popular among the upper class. After a busy day, the aristocrats would sit down and suck on a happiness card to let go of all their worries and welcome the next day with a more positive outlook. In a duel, a brilliant sorcerer would be good at using the emotion series magic card to raise their own or the opponent's magic fairy's emotions. From there, they would stimulate their own magic fairy's combat power, or make the opponent's magic fairy reveal a flaw. Because the method to make the emotion series magic card was very simple, it was the learning goal of the freshmen in the first month. Dake was the fastest and most stable in drawing the refining formation in the class. There was even a period of time when he was called the Eagle Hand. The magic pen was a type of pen with a hollow inside, imitating the structure of blood vessels. Remember the website, Vipkanshu. VIP. The mercury flowing in the blood vessels of the magic pen would guide the magic to the tip of the pen, making it easier for the sorcerer to gather and refine the magic to draw finer lines. Although a mature sorcerer could do the same thing without using a magic pen, using a magic pen could reduce the dispersion of the concentration and increase efficiency. Of course, a beginner like Dake would not be able to do without a magic pen in a short period of time. The drawing of the refining formation had to be fast, steady, and accurate. Dake used only 7 seconds to complete the drawing of the number 7 refining formation. He finished the last stroke, formed a circle, and connected the circuits. The moment the refining formation was completed, there was a sudden burst of intense white light. But the white light quickly changed and turned into the dark gold color of the magic card itself. Dake watched the magic card nervously. The final refining stage of the magic card was like putting all the ingredients in a pot and then cooking them over a fire. Before the lid was lifted, no one would know what was inside. The freshman would complete this final step during the courtyard allocation ceremony. However, the sorting card had already been adjusted to the point where it would automatically start refining as long as mana was poured in. And this magic card in front of him was the first magic card that Dake had personally made. Its success was not only significant, it also meant that Dake had finally found a way to convert the 7 sins into power. The essence of magic was idealistic. Be it knowledge, emotions, thoughts, or creativity, in the eyes of magic, they were all sources of power. There was no reason why the 7 deadly sins couldn't be converted into power. A few seconds later, the refinement formation seeped into the card and went straight to the back of the card, fusing and refining the materials with the magic card. When the clear number 7 refining circle appeared on the back of the magic card, the refining of the magic card was considered complete. Next was the acceptance phase. Even if it were made according to the established procedures, there would still be different effects due to various factors. Not to mention that the magic card in front of him was made by Dake. He needed to conduct a small experiment. And the subject of the experiment naturally couldn't be himself. Dake's gaze turned and immediately looked at the little devil beast that was standing on the bird stand on the ceiling, imitating an owl. Then he showed a kind smile. Although the familiar could only be considered as a simulated life form, it was still a species with an intelligence level of 2.5 emotions and self-consciousness. Since that was the case, it would be affected by the emotional series of magic cards. Dark waved his hand at the little fiendish beast. The little devil beast tilted its head, spread its wings and flew down. Dark took Pride's magic card and placed it on the other side of the desk. Then, he pulled out a bird chain from the desk, opened the buckle, and fastened it onto the little fiend's left ankle. The room's windows were closed, and the curtains were drawn tightly, forming a perfect secret room. After the little devil beast was put on the ankle, it couldn't help but show an aggrieved expression. Asterisk, comma. Dake observed for a while and recorded the time in his notebook. 3:29 in the afternoon. Wait for another minute. It was exactly 3:30. My turn, magic summoning. Dake used his index and middle fingers to hold Pride's magic card and activated summoning. In an instant, the magic card was activated. A layer of black light appeared on the surface of the card, and a dark golden ball of light with a long tail suddenly flew out from the magic card, wobbling as it drilled into the little devil beast's head. At that moment, Dake and the little devil beast narrowed their eyes at the same time. Time seemed to have stopped, and the room was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. The little devil beast was the first to open its eyes, and a dark golden light bloomed from the gap of its eyes. The corner of its mouth rose, its eyes were sharp, and its chin was slightly raised, opening its mouth. I, the little devil beast, want to stand above the sky. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Asterisk. Dake was startled at first, then he was ecstatic. Whether or not the little devil beast became arrogant under the influence of Pride's magic card, it was no longer important. The most important thing now was that it could speak human language. Everyone knew that digital beasts could speak human language. However, the mechanism of the birth of demonic spirits was different from that of digital beasts. At least this little devil beast could not speak at first, and its intelligence level was slightly lower than that of ordinary wild beasts. Now it had absorbed Pride's energy, and its speech was smooth. Does this mean that its life form has changed, and it is closer to a digital beast? Professor Shi Erfu said that the birth of a demonic spirit is inseparable from the magic power, knowledge, personality, and other factors of the magus. Perhaps, the demonic spirit that I summoned is not the same type of life form as the little devil beast that exists in this world. The greatest magus in history, Merlin, once said that the difference in cognition determines the difference in magic. Also, Dake looked at the Pride magic card in his hand. Fine cracks had already appeared on the card body. The Emotion Series magic card could be used repeatedly. It seemed that this magic card had already transcended the category of emotion, and was a one-time use. Dake thought of a word. Demonization. The so-called magical beasts in this world were all wild beasts that had lost their minds after being demonized. The little devil beast's current state should be closer to the arrogance of demonization. He thought about it and recorded this magic card as Pride Eye. Then, he wrote down the corresponding effect in his notebook. Next, he was prepared to observe this little devil beast that had been arrogated, to see how long it would take for it to return to its original state. Servant, release my shackles. Recommend me. Chapter 17. It seems that Pride Eye didn't give it too much power. Dake carefully observed the little devil beast's behavior. Its will was still there, and its personality had changed because of the influence of Pride Eye. It seemed to want to break the bird chain and felt that it was an insult. But its strength wasn't enough to support it to break free from the bird chain. Speaking of strength, Dake immediately thought of the little devil beast's sure kill skill, Small Dart. As a familiar, it originally didn't have the ability to release sure kill skills. But now that it had changed so much, it might be able to. So Dake wrote a few words in his notebook and looked up. Little devil beast, use Small Dart on the wall. The little fiendish beast folded its wings, raised its head forcefully, and said arrogantly, Unlock. Dake was amused. But a familiar was a familiar after all. It couldn't really go against its master's will. In order to better observe the little devil beast's skill release, Dake unlocked the lock on its ankle. The little devil beast gained freedom and immediately flapped its wings twice in the room. Then it flapped its wings and shouted, Small Dart! In the blink of an eye, 3 shark-headed syringes appeared under its wings and shot towards the wall. Puff, puff, puff. The 3 syringes pierced the wall at the same time, forming a perfect triangle. But after a while, the 3 syringes turned into light spots and disappeared, leaving only 3 holes in the wall. Dake immediately wrote in his notebook, The skill release was successful. It can prove that the test subject is no longer a familiar. 343. The dark gold color in the little devil beast's eyes gradually faded and turned back to the normal light yellow color. It suddenly blinked, extended its wings, tilted its head, and fell back on the table with a plop. It even straightened its claws, looking very much like a dead sparrow. The effect of pride lasts for about 13 minutes. It's 3 to 5 times stronger than the effect of a normal emotion card. Dake wrote this line in his notebook, then looked up at the little devil beast and said helplessly, Don't play dead. The little demonic beast was still motionless. Dake reached out and scratched its chin. The little demonic beast immediately giggled and curled up into a ball. Then, with a jerk, it raised its head stiffly and looked at Dake with pleading eyes. You didn't have this expression when you pointed at my nose and called me your servant. Dake deliberately said with a straight face. The little demonic beast rolled its eyes and immediately realized that its master was not angry. It quickly flattered, Master. Dake shuddered. But he quickly wrote in his notebook, The change in life form has not been reversed. Even though he couldn't figure out the secret behind it, the little monster had indeed turned from a tamed demon into a life form that was very close to a digitalized beast after being baptized by pride. Dake believed that this change was irreversible. It was like a magus awakening his innate talent, gaining magic power, and becoming extraordinary from then on. And after the little demonic beast awakened, it became even noisier. Although the little demonic beast that couldn't speak would occasionally be mischievous, its good habit of being an ultimate bootlicker made it very popular. But what if it could speak? What if it was eccentric and disgusting all day long? This was a point that needed to be paid attention to. Dake didn't want to miss out on Sheng Malian takeout again. Perhaps it would be a good idea to give it a flail. Under its master's strange gaze, the little demonic beast quickly stood up and obediently folded its wings behind its back, like a primary school student being admonished. Dake shook his head and decided to continue his research. Right, don't talk in front of outsiders. Now, using the magic brain dropper, the indicator of pride was lowered from 112 to 111. But it was far from enough. But using the magic brain dropper was very dangerous and had to be done carefully. Dake didn't immediately use it a second time. The guide to using the magic brain dropper clearly recorded, "If you don't want to suddenly become an idiot, remember not to extract the thought matter more than once a month." It referred to things like memories, emotions, knowledge, and thoughts as thought matter, and recommended moderation. But Dake had read the entire book and knew that magus who studied this field would usually extract it 2 to 3 times a month. Because experiments were always accompanied by failure, there was a need to take responsibility if one wanted to make a breakthrough. And as the number of extraction of thought matter increased in a month, the risk also showed a trend of increasing. After 3 times, the risk was close to 60%, which was more than half. Therefore, there was also the saying, "Don't do it more than 3 times." Of course, the magus in the book dared to extract it 2 to 3 times a month because their skills were excellent. Even so, extracting it like this for several months could easily cause intermittent amnesia. Dake was self-aware and knew that it was extremely dangerous for him to extract the thought matter normally now. That was why he chose the dragonfly skimming the water method. The dragonfly skimming the water method could only extract the thought matter that overflowed the brain, so the risk was very low. But even so, he couldn't use it without restraint. According to the guide to using the magic brain dropper, it was best to use it once every 24 hours, and after 10 consecutive uses, it was best to use it again every month. Give the brain time to fully recover. The brain was the most complex system in the human body, and no amount of caution could be too much. And there was no need to rush. According to Dake's understanding of the dragonfly skimming the water method, it should only be used to extract the part whose index exceeded 100. Therefore, only pride could be extracted at the moment. Next, he was prepared to go to the library to look for and study information related to the emotional series of magic cards, striving to further improve Pride I. Or perhaps focus on developing Pride II. At 4:30 in the afternoon, Dake was already in the library. Senior Panduola in the library seemed to be on vacation, and she wasn't there that day. That was really great. Dake completed his registration under Miss Bella's kind gaze, and entered the library in a relaxed mood. The creation of Pride I was originally part of his plan, but it was only one of many routes. He was very clear that if he only suppressed it blindly and couldn't convert the great sins into power that he could use, then the following road would only be a desperate struggle, and he would eventually be forced into a desperate situation. Stupid people would only run away. Smart people would guide them. Today, he confirmed the route of making the overflowing great sins into a magic card. It was an opening. As for the extent to which the great sins series of magic cards could be developed, and what kind of core power could it display, everything was still unknown. The swaying light caressed the desk in the library. Dake's back view of the dimming looked even more majestic. You're tuning in to the Whispers of Romance YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.